This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate first part of What If Naruto Became Summoner of the Dead. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Haku vs Naruto and Sasuke during the battle at Wave Village. Burning with rage, hatred, and despair, Naruto let out a roar. He held Sasuke's lifeless body in his arm. Even as a great deal of malevolent red chakra exploded out of his body, altering him, tears ran down his cheeks. His eyes became more fox-like, his nails grew longer, and his face took on a more untamed appearance. Naruto ignored them because he felt stronger than ever and planned to use this strength to eliminate the ninja he detested who was hiding in the ice mirrors. Naruto knelt on the ground, using all of his hands and legs to gently place Sasuke's lifeless body. He had a single, beastly thought going through his head. The ninja is going to die. The nine-tailed fox sensed the vast chakra shifting inside Naruto's body as he inadvertently tapped into it out of desperation. The enormous fox shifted in its cage. Maybe it's time to take action and finally escape. The fox smiled, forming a plan in its mind. The nine-tailed fox struck the death seal that held it behind the cage with 9 full tails of its chakra in a single concentrated blast. However, there was one thing that the Kyuubi failed to consider. By using the death god's might to keep the Kyuubi imprisoned inside his son, the Yondaime gave his life as a sacrifice. There were no tailed beasts in the world that could match the power of death. A weakened Kyuubi was slammed deep into its cell by the massive explosion that resulted from the collision of death energy and the energy of the 9 tails. 9 of Kyuubi's tail and the enormous residue energies of death combined to form a yellow-green chakra that permeated every cell in Naruto's body, altering him irrevocably. Haku stared at the likable blonde child he had met once before, stunned, inside his ice mirrors. When he believed his friend was dead, he underwent a remarkable transformation. A spiral of red chakra had started to flow from his body. As his body started to heal quickly, the ice senbons that were embedded in it started to pop out onto the floor. There was a sense of great killing intent in the air as more of the red chakra poured out of his body. The boy then changed, his face growing more fox-like even as he squatted on his hands and knees on the floor, seemingly prepared to leap like an animal at Haku. The energies that were permeating the air abruptly changed with an audible snap. As if it had never been there, the red chakra abruptly disappeared from the atmosphere. Even as a bright yellow and green corona of chakra encircled the blonde boy, encasing his entire body in a cocoon of chakra, he was slammed into the floor. Fascinated, Haku watched. What on earth was going on? Suddenly, the green and yellow chakra vanished. The blonde boy got to his feet and stared at his body, his face showing relief that he saw nothing wrong with it. His claw-like nails and the fierce expression on his face had vanished. The boy was blind to the fact that his blonde hair was now streaked with green, and that the blue pupils in both of his sapphire eyes were encircled by rims of the purest green. Even as he watched, Haku stood motionless, wondering what to do. The boy jerked toward his friend's unconscious body and rushed forward, swiping at the air as though attempting to push something away from the Uchiha before he began speaking. Naruto awoke groggily. The first was the ferocious red chakra that had given him strength. Then he felt a sudden, overwhelming yellow-green chakra that surrounded him and brought him peace. When the yellow-green chakra vanished and he got to his feet, Naruto was relieved to see that he was still the same person without any additional horns or anything else because he could sense the chakra changing him. He was wondering what the devil had happened when he suddenly snapped out of it to see a long-haired black woman sitting next to Sasuke's body with a dejected expression on her face. In horror, Naruto screamed, "Hey, what do you think you're doing? Get away from him!" as he attempted to push the odd woman away from Sasuke. As his hands moved through the woman, he let out a startled cry. Even as her eyes darted to Naruto's hair and then back to him, the enigmatic woman raised her head to gaze at him in astonishment. Before turning to face Naruto, the woman exclaimed, "You can see me? Those green hair and eyes, I see. I've heard of the bloodline existing in other worlds. I am just not aware this world has the bloodline as well. Please, you've got to listen to me. Sasuke is still alive. I am not sure why that female ninja did not kill him, but if you don't listen to me, the two of you might be dead." As Naruto turned to face the ice mirror containing the enemy ninja, he asked in disbelief, "Sasuke is alive? And she's a girl?" With a look of urgency in her eyes, the woman stated, "Yes, he's still alive. The enemy nin only strike at his acupoints to send him into a death-like slumber. Listen to me. I am a phantom, a dead spirit who refused to move on. You have unlocked a rare bloodline which allows you to see me and I hope summon me as well. Follow my instructions and you may survive this." Naruto took a small step back in surprise and then shook his head, saying, "I can see the dead. But what's the catch? Why are you willing to help us? The woman cast a sorrowful glance at Sasuke before turning to face Naruto. I am Makoto Uchiha, Sasuke's mother, and I am not going to allow my son to follow me into the death realm. Naruto gaped, looking at the woman in front of him with wide eyes. Now that she had brought it up, it was clear that Sasuke and the woman had similar facial features, particularly the delicate cheekbones and jawline. Makoto glared at Naruto and said, "Follow my instructions, Naruto. I've only heard of your bloodline from the spirits in the death realm. What I heard is just idle gossip, but I distinctly remember that those with your bloodline are supposed to tag your chakra to the spirit who had swore fealty to you. You can then channel that chakra into an inanimate object so that you can summon the spirit." Naruto turned pale. That sounds like it requires a lot of chakra control. Mine isn't really that good. Makoto angrily yelled, "Try it, or you and Sasuke will both be joining me." She approached Naruto and gave him a phantom arm. I Makoto Uchiha swear fealty to Naruto Uzumaki, in a pact of summoner and spirit. For a brief moment, a flash of white light appeared around the spot where Makoto had touched him, and Naruto felt Makoto's presence in his thoughts. Her fear and concern for Sasuke, who was now lying still on the ground, was palpable to him. With his eyes swiveling, Naruto focused and directed a thread of chakra towards Makoto's spirit, searching for another object to attach his chakra to. He was looking around wildly when he noticed the ice mirror where the enemy ninja was hiding. Naruto tagged the mirror with a burst of chakra that sent his energy rushing forward. Even as the ice mirror holding the enemy ninja vanished, Makoto disappeared before his eyes, falling to the ground. The area where the ice mirror once stood glowed and smoldered with greenish-yellow energies, forming into a human form before the enemy ninja could move. Makoto Uchiha landed in front of the enemy ninja after gaining a physical body made from the ice mirror. Makoto grinned and said, "I have been waiting for this." Her hands flashed through multiple hand seals. "Don't worry, since you've spared my son, I'll only beat you half to death." Even as the enemy ninja barely jumped away, Makoto's lips released a huge fire dragon. Naruto hurried over to Sasuke behind the two fighters and started removing the different ice senbons from his body. Sasuke was still alive, according to Makoto, and Naruto was going to make sure he didn't die any sooner. As Kakashi tiredly drew his hand out of Zabuza's stomach, the fog started to lift. The missing nin was killed by the Chidori attack, but Kakashi also lost the majority of his chakra in the process. Kakashi staggered as he made his way toward the location where he had last seen Naruto and Sasuke, half running, half walking. During the fight, he had sensed the Kyuubi's chakra leave Naruto, but it had quickly disappeared. Kakashi, who wasn't religious, prayed in a low voice, hoping Naruto wouldn't be hurt. With Zabuza no longer present to keep up the fog technique, the last of the mist dissipated. With wide eyes, Kakashi stared at the scene before him and came to a stop. He felt a wave of shock that left him motionless. He couldn't move because he couldn't see Naruto other than an unconscious Sasuke. No, Kakashi was terrified when he saw a stunning, long-haired woman wearing Uchiha clan garb, her arm encircling the unconscious body of an enemy ninja beside her. A part of Kakashi cried out that it was impossible, but he asked in fear, "Am I, Koto?" Makoto said, "Yes, Kakashi?" As though her physical presence in this world were normal. "You've really grown up. I could still remember the time when you were in diapers and your mother brought you around the Uchiha compound." Makoto stopped and gazed off into the distance, where she could hear loud noises coming from the end of the bridge. Kakashi turned as he heard footsteps and clattering metal. He saw Gato approaching them with a sizable contingent of mercenaries, and his mouth curled into a grim line. Kakashi was still too exhausted from the last battle with Zabuza to handle this new threat, and too much was going on at once. Makoto walked forward, dropping the second enemy nin beside him, and said, "Leave them to me, Kakashi. From the looks of it, you're almost out of chakra. Make sure this little ninja don't try to run away. She spared Sasuke, I want to know why." A few men scoffed at Makoto as she walked forward and stood in front of Gato and his men before Kakashi could stop her. At the sight of Makoto, one of the mercenaries scoffed, "Look boss, a woman, and quite a sweet piece at that. Can we have her after all this is over?" Gato laughed and said, "Of course. Just remember to burn the whole village to the ground before that." Makoto smiled sweetly at the disheveled men in front of her and said, "How about I burn all of you first?" Her hands flashed into a series of hand seals. Before Gato and his mercenaries could flee, a huge fire dragon exploded from her lips and crashed into them. All the scumbags in front of Makoto were barbecued, and she wrinkled her nose at the smell of burned flesh. Makoto stumbled as a sudden wave of weakness passed through her body. Makoto muttered as her soul was forced from her temporary body, "I guess my time's up." Makoto's body transformed back into a huge ice mirror before breaking into fragments and falling to the ground. With shocked expressions on their faces, the villagers gathered by Inari at the other end of the bridge came to a stop in front of Sakura and Tazuna, who had been observing everything since the fog cleared. As they gazed at the massive, charred remains of bodies at the end of the bridge, where construction had stopped in the middle, one of the villagers questioned, "What happened?" "Inari rounded up all of us, told us Gato and his men were supposed to be here." Behind his mask, Kakashi's lips curled into a smile as he gazed at the army of villagers carrying pans and pitchforks. As the villagers' eyes widened, Kakashi pointed to the charred mass of bodies and said, "I believe that's the charred remains of Gato and his men. You might want to clear their bodies off the bridge before the stink of the bodies made the bridge unusable." Even as Tazuna took over, Inari fled to the edge of the bridge and started throwing up. With a shake of Inari's head, Tazuna commanded, "All the women get the children back to the village. You did good, Inari. I am proud of you. Now I need you to go back with the others." After that, Tazuna glared at the villagers. "The men to me. These kind ninjas disposed of Gato and his men. The least we can do is to clear their bodies." Kakashi gestured to Zabuza's uncharred body and said, "Don't touch that one. I'll bury that one myself." "Naruto, how's Sasuke?" The voice of Sasuke said, I am awake, sensei." Turning, Kakashi saw Naruto assisting his teammate. After surveying his surroundings, Sasuke looked around him bewildered. "What happened while I was out?" "You wouldn't believe it," exclaimed Naruto excitedly. "I got a bloodline and I was able to summon the dead. I even summon your." When he finally understood why Makoto had appeared, Kakashi yelled, "Naruto," and interrupted Naruto in the middle of his sentence. At that moment, he became aware that Naruto had somewhat changed in appearance. Naruto's blonde hair was streaked with green and how can you summon the dead? That's impossible, Sasuke remarked, glancing at Naruto despite his laughter at the prospect of Naruto's purported bloodline. "There are green rims in your eyes, Naruto." "But Naruto started angrily, despite Sakura's joyful squeak and rushed towards Sasuke. Group 7. After you've bound this enemy ninja, assist me in burying Zabuza's body, and head back to Tazuna's house. We'll discuss this," Kakashi stated in a loud voice that didn't break any arguments. "Don't speak until then, Naruto." However, as he stumbled towards Kakashi, pulling a rope from his pouch, Naruto whimpered but abruptly stopped at Kakashi's warning glance. Behind him, Sasuke was attempting to push Sakura away from him, but he was too weak to do so. Kakashi approached Naruto as he got closer. "You claim to be able to call forth the dead, Naruto. Is Sasuke's mother mentioned there?" As the villagers passed them to remove the bodies, Kakashi asked in a low voice that no one could hear. The fact that someone appeared to believe him made Naruto smile. "Yes." Kakashi clutched Naruto's arms as he hesitated. Kakashi cautioned, "Say in a softer voice, can you call her again? She says that the stay in the temporary body had drained her spirit essence, and she can probably be summoned again in a day's time," Naruto said, turning his head to one side as though he were listening to someone. An invisible phantom appeared to be speaking to Naruto as he cocked his head to one side and said, "She says she'll return to the Death Realm in the meantime to find out more about my bloodline." Even as he considered the possibilities of Naruto's bloodline, Kakashi staggered back, his head dizzy. If Naruto's bloodline was real and enemy ninja villages learned of it, Kakashi grimly pressed his lips together. "Naruto, please swear to me that you won't discuss your ancestry with anyone. Nobody, you know?" Kakashi firmly grasped Naruto's arms to make his point, saying, "Until we can confirm it with the Hokage, I am classifying this as an SS rank secret." "A secret SS rank?" Naruto said, stars shining in his eyes. "But why?" "Your bloodline is impossible, Naruto, but how many ninja villages would want it if it turned out to be real?" In a low voice, Kakashi stated, "If word spreads that such a bloodline exists, a war could start. Please swear to me that you won't tell anyone, not even Sakura and Sasuke. Simply explain that the woman was a family friend who assisted you and that you were joking earlier if someone inquired." "But that would mean they would think I am lying." Naruto frowned as he turned to face Sasuke, who had escaped Sakura's clutches and was approaching Naruto and Kakashi while Sakura was frantically pursuing him. "They wouldn't believe it anyway, it would be too impossible for them to acknowledge." Kakashi continued. "But until we talk with the Hokage, I want you to promise not to say a word of it." Naruto sighed in defeat. "All right. This sucks, I finally got a bloodline but can't talk about it." Naruto glanced at Kakashi after turning to one side as though he was hearing a voice. However, Makoto-san claims she wants Sasuke to be aware of it. Naruto's eyes widened as he gazed at Kakashi and said, "She says if you stop her, she'll beat you up, like the last time you stole her baked cookies. I see. I suppose Sasuke should be permitted to see her at the very least if your bloodline is genuine. In the meantime, if someone inquired about your hair and eyes, tell them it's a chakra accident. Kakashi said, stepping back, we'll talk tomorrow when you can summon her again. What's the matter with my eyes and hair? Even as Kakashi waved and moved in the direction of Zabuza's body, Naruto made a demand. The second enemy ninja's mask fell away, and Naruto gasped as he bent down to tie her up, complaining that no one was responding. Hey, that guy from earlier. When Sakura and Sasuke arrived at Naruto, he exclaimed in disbelief, wait a minute, Mikoto-san said she is a girl, so why did the enemy nin tell me she is a guy? Haku woke up drowsily to discover that her hands and legs were bound together, and she instantly snapped out of it when she noticed that Kakashi, his genin team, and the copycat ninja were gathered in front of what appeared to be a burial plot, and that they were lowering a body into it. She recognized Zabuza's pale form and was shocked. No. Zabuza-sama. As the body of her caretaker and mentor was lowered into the excavated hole, Haku let out a sob of sorrow. As she screamed, the three genin team members ran to see her, but Kakashi was unfazed and kept lowering the body into the ground so Haku couldn't see it. Hey. As he strode forward frowning, the blonde boy said, you're that girl from before, and you made me think you're a guy all these time. You're awake. I even made sure by checking. You what? No wonder I thought her clothes were a bit messed up, the pink-haired girl next to him said, sounding enraged as she punched the boy in the head. You're a pervert. Haku ignored the black-haired boy who was muttering about idiots next to them as tears ran down her cheeks. She felt hopeless at the idea that her most valuable person was vanishing right before her eyes. Glancing at the shocked ninjas, Haku yelled, kill me. Why haven't you killed me yet? Kill me, please. Haku started crying as the three teenagers stared motionless. I regret to inform you that someone still fervently wants you to live. You're our prisoner until then, Kakashi stated icily. Don't bother trying to get out. I've put seals on you that drain chakra. Please assist me in excavating the ground to cover Zabuza's grave, Team 7. Haku attempted to stand on her tied legs as the teenagers shifted to retrieve shovels. Hold on. Let me do that for him, please, using my own hands. Let me do this one thing for him, please. Haku pleaded, trying to stagger forward through her tears. Please, I beg you, let me do this. I wouldn't try to run away. Kakashi and his genin team just stared back at her for a moment before the kid with the blonde hair stepped forward and pulled out a kunai. What do you think you're doing, Naruto? As Naruto started to cut at the ropes securing Haku's hands and legs, Kakashi let out a yell. Those chakra seal items are already on her. You previously informed us that she is no longer able to use any ninja techniques, correct? Without turning to face Kakashi, Naruto remarked, let her at least do this one last thing for someone she cares about. Haku, finally free, rushed forward, ignoring the shovel the pink-haired girl tried to give her as she scooped up handfuls of earth down into the grave and bending down to watch Zabuza as she sobbed. Haku paused when she felt a hand on her shoulder and looked up to see the blonde child grinning reassuringly at her while he gazed at the empty air above the grave. Zabuza-sama, wait for me. Haku sobbed as she threw more earth down to cover the body. The blonde child smiled encouragingly and said, don't worry, Zabuza will be watching over you, that's what he said. Kakashi gave his student a worried glance, but Haku didn't see him stiffen. She kept filling the grave, seeing only the earth and Zabuza-sama. When Kakashi staggered into the kitchen, he felt much better than he had the day before, and since there was no longer any threat of Gato, he and his team were permitted to sleep in. Tazuna had demanded that Team 7 be given a more relaxed morning after yesterday's events, and he had left with the village men to work on the bridge, but just in case, Kakashi had sent a shadow clone to keep a close watch over Tazuna. As Tsunami ran around the kitchen making a substantial breakfast for Sasuke and Sakura, who were already there, Sakura was bringing some porridge to a restrained and silent Haku, while Sasuke was eating his own food. Kakashi had left her alone, guarded by a shadow clone as he went to bed, but she had remained stubbornly silent after Haku had revealed her name shortly after yesterday's burial of Zabuza. Tsunami, who had objected to tying the girl up yesterday until Kakashi persuaded her that it was best because she was an enemy ninja, looked up at him as she heard him enter and said, Kakashi-san. She scowled at Haku but said nothing. Please sit down, would you like some eggs? Where is Naruto? Indeed. Kakashi inquired as to whether his most surprising pupil was still asleep. Sakura looked up and said, he left just before you came down, says he's going for a walk. What's wrong with his eyes and hair? Sakura asked. Seeing those green lines in them is strange. I've never heard of anything that could cause those colorations, but he claims it's a chakra accident. As Sakura sipped the porridge Tsunami had placed in front of him, Kakashi calmly reassured him, once we get to Konoha, I'll take him to a doctor. In the meantime, Sakura, after breakfast, I want you to go to the woods and practice tree walking for 5 hours. You don't have enough chakra reserves. Sakura said, somewhat dejected, yes sensei. Kakashi looked at Sasuke and said, as for you Sasuke, come with me after breakfast, I'll teach you more about your bloodline. Sasuke swallowed his porridge rapidly, his eyes widening. I'm done, Kakashi-sensei, was Sasuke's urgent response. Then Kakashi sighed. I'm not done yet Sasuke, have a little patience. Naruto continued walking through the forest before turning to confront Makoto's ghost, which was floating next to him. With the dead swordsman standing in front of him, Naruto waved an urgent hand at Zabuza's smiling ghost and asked, why did you bring him here for? Kakashi-sensei explicitly told me not to talk to him yesterday night. Makoto stated plainly, I want you to make a pact with him. He's strong and powerful, and I'll feel more assured if you have more powerful spirits to call upon to protect yourself and Sasuke. Are you out of your mind? He tried to kill Kakashi-sensei yesterday. How'd I know he wouldn't turn on us? Naruto was upset. Because once a spirit swears fealty to a soul summoner, the spirit has to obey the summoner's every command. The spirit can never betray the summoner after the pact is formed. Makoto stated simply. The worst a spirit can do is to break the pact it has formed with you if she strongly disagree with your actions or orders. I found more information about your bloodline during the night I spent in the Death Realm. Just trust me on this Naruto, accept Zabuza as your servant. Zabuza glared at Makoto and protested angrily, I am no one's servant. Makoto sternly demanded, do you want to at least spend some time alive in this world and walk in physical form? Because Naruto is the only soul summoner in this world, and he's the only one who can make you physical again. With a sour expression on his face, Zabuza grimly pursed his lips. I'll swear my powers and skills in service to Naruto on one condition. I want Haku in on this secret. I don't care about living in this world again. Death is death, but Haku needs me, and I can't let her down. I want her to be able to see me again. That could prove problematic. Kakashi is right in a way. Naruto's bloodline is too powerful and a war could break out among the ninja villages, to vie for control over Naruto, if they know such a bloodline truly exists. Makoto grinned. I don't want our only soul summoner and my son to be dragged into a war as power pawns to be used by the politicians. Zabuza firmly stated, I can make Haku promise never to reveal Naruto's bloodline. That kid is very dependent on me, too dependent, she'll never break any promise she made to me. Makoto looked at Zabuza with a hint of disgust in her eyes and remarked, I've seen how dependent that child is. You've all but molded her into your perfect weapon. Though from what I see, you might treat her like a tool, but in truth you really love her as a father, don't you? Makoto glared at her and was rudely interrupted by Zabuza, who said impatiently, she's just a child I took in. Stop being meddlesome woman, do you want the pact or not? Makoto turned to Naruto, who nodded and extended his hand to Zabuza, saying, all right then, Naruto, since we have Zabuza's promise that Haku can keep a secret, let's form this pact. As his phantom hand touched Naruto's outstretched palm, Zabuza uttered the simple words, I Zabuza swear fealty to Naruto Uzumaki, in a pact of summoner and spirit. The pact was symbolized by a blaze of light. Makoto turned to face Naruto and remarked, I think it's time to call Kakashi and Sasuke, I've got lots of things to tell them. Zabuza said, his eyes full of concern, Haku as well, you promised. As Naruto formed the hand seals, a shadow clone materialized. Okay, I'll send a shadow clone to get them. Before rushing away, the clone gave them a nod. Naruto, you've better find somewhere to sit down first, I'll begin once everyone is here, Makoto responded. When the door opened and Naruto hurried in, Tsunami looked up. When Naruto noticed Kakashi watching over Haku, who was seated in the kitchen, he exclaimed, Kakashi-sensei. With relief. Where's Sasuke? We need to meet now. Kakashi answered, I am a shadow clone Naruto. The real Kakashi left with Sasuke to search for you. The Naruto clone grinned and said, oh, good, then you can help me carry Haku to Naruto. I am a shadow clone as well. The Kakashi clone approached the Naruto clone, who whispered in his ears, and asked, what is going on? He jerked his head up and gave the Naruto clone a gloomy look. You what, Naruto? In an attempt to calm the Kakashi clone, the Naruto clone frantically exclaimed, he promised me and she said it was okay. As she washed the dishes, Tsunami wondered who the he and she Naruto was referring to near the sink. The grim Kakashi clone uttered, if the promise is broken, it'll be your head. Where's the real Naruto's location? The Naruto clone whispered to the Kakashi clone once more, and when he nodded, he stood up and performed a hand seal. The Naruto clone inquired inquisitively, what are you doing? As stated by the Kakashi clone. Lesson number 1 Naruto. Shadow clones pass their memories back to their creators when they dispel. I am going to inform Kakashi of Naruto's location. Since you created this whole mess, you can carry Haku there yourself, and don't untie her. The clone of Naruto exclaimed, as the clone of Kakashi vanished. This sucks. We're looking for Naruto, but why? Sasuke asked impatiently. I thought we're going to practice Sharingan techniques. As they entered the woods and Kakashi listened for any noises that might lead them to Naruto, he said, you'll see. Before gritting his teeth, he jerked backwards as though he had collided with an imperceptible wall. That Naruto. Sasuke looked at his sensei, who had been acting strangely since this morning, and asked, are you alright, Kakashi-sensei? Kakashi led the way, saying, follow me Sasuke, I know where he is. Naruto was sitting on a log in a clearing after Kakashi guided them through a number of twists and turns. Grinning, Naruto leapt to his feet and waved to Kakashi. Yo, sensei! Exclaimed Naruto with joy, where's Haku? Your shadow clone is bringing her over. Kakashi sighed in frustration. Naruto pouted and said, what, you left my clone to do the work? We were already on our way here, and we didn't even meet any of Naruto's clone. How do you know about Naruto's clone Kakashi-sensei? Sasuke replied with a scowl. The shadow clones are able to transfer their memories back to their creator once they are dispelled. The clone I said to guard Haku has met Naruto's clone before dispelling, passing me the message about Naruto's location. Kakashi said as he looked at Naruto. It will be wise for you to remember that Naruto, it will help you in your training. Naruto exclaimed with excitement at this little known feature of his favorite technique. Wow, that is so cool. I never knew that about my favorite technique. Well then we'll just have to wait for Haku to arrive. Makoto-san said she'll only speak once everyone has arrived. Naruto's words brought to mind the name of his mother, who passed away, and Sasuke felt a sharp pain in his chest. Although he questioned why Kakashi-sensei had brought him here rather than training him, Naruto was most likely referring to someone he had met in the village because Makoto was a common name. Kakashi, meanwhile, leaned against a tree and scowled but said nothing. Sasuke glanced at him and remained silent as well. It didn't appear that his sensei would be telling him what was happening anytime soon. We will wait, this place is quite near the house. Your clone shouldn't be taking long to reach here, Kakashi said. Naruto started whistling as Sasuke grunted and sat down on the grass. After a few minutes, there were distant huffing sounds and quick footsteps. A tightly bound Haku was dumped in front of Naruto as the Naruto clone exploded into the clearing. The clone said, here you go boss, and then spelled it out. After giving a nod, Naruto rose with a knife and released Haku's bonds. Haku got to his feet and turned to gaze with wide eyes at Naruto, Sasuke, and Kakashi. For the first time, Haku looked around wildly and asked, what do you bring me here for? She broke her silence and looked around, noting that there were no women in the clearing, not even the pink-haired girl. Naruto grinned at her and said, it's better for you to be freed before we begin. As Haku slammed a fist into his face, he grunted. Haku laughed bitterly and clutched her clothes to her body, saying, I thought you were decent people. But I guess men are all the same, just like Zabuza-sama had warned me. As though he understood Haku's thoughts, Kakashi laughed and said, don't be so quick to jump to conclusion. We are not going to do anything to you if that's what you're wondering. For one thing, you're too young to interest me, while Naruto and Sasuke are still underage to be thinking about sex. Clinging to his nose, Naruto questioned, sex? What's this about sex? And why did you punch me for Haku? That's painful. You mean, Haku said, letting her relax a little as she faltered. You mean you're not going to do anything to me? Of course not, Naruto uttered, muttering softly about crazy girls and grunting painfully. Haku retreated from Naruto and questioned, then why am I here? Sasuke said, that's what I want to know. Why am I here when I should be out in the woods training to get stronger? Naruto threw 2 kunais into the ground and remarked, the 2 of you are here because there are some people that want to see you. Naruto's face twisted into a focused expression. Sasuke sensed a lot of Naruto's chakra flare up in the air through his chakra senses. Sasuke demanded, what are you doing Naruto? Before he abruptly stopped. The air above them shimmered, then solidified into 2 humans, and the 2 kunais on the ground had disappeared. One was a long-haired woman who was grinning at Sasuke, and the other was Zabuza, who had only been buried yesterday. It was the woman who reminded him of his mother. Kakashi, who seemed surprised himself, explained from the side that Naruto awakened his bloodline yesterday. It seems that he could really summon the dead. Naruto watched Sasuke's shocked expression and smiled. Then, with a roar, Sasuke charged at Mikoto, holding 2 kunai, intending to stab her, and he blinked. As he hurled the kunais at Mikoto, Sasuke cried out, "What trickery is this? I saw my mother die, I saw all of them die." Mikoto calmly pulled the kunais from the air and then rapped Sasuke's forehead so hard that he staggered back. Mikoto looked at Sasuke, whose eyes widened in shock at the memory, and said in a level voice, "You stole my makeup to paint the walls of our home when you were 5, Sasuke. When I found out about it, I sentenced you to cleaning the walls before I would let you have your dinner." Even as Sasuke's eyes began to well up with tears, Mikoto went on, "I would boil 2 eggs painted red just for you, on the mornings of every birthday since you were 3, to ensure that you grow up in good health. In the afternoons of all your birthdays, I would then take you to the Uchiha Shrine and pray to the Lord of Fire that you'll have a bright future ahead of you. Are you telling me that you've already forgotten all the time we spent together?" "Mom." Sasuke staggered forward and asked in a broken voice, "It's really you?" As Sasuke rushed forward, Mikoto opened her arms to embrace him and said, "Yes, it is me, Sasuke." Naruto swallowed painfully and turned his head away. Seeing families together was always difficult for him because he had never met his parents. When Naruto discovered that he could call upon his parents' spirits, his mood brightened. He turned to face Haku and Zabuza, who were both standing motionless and staring at each other, and felt happier at that thought. Zabuza grunted to break the silence. Zabuza commanded, "Take my sword from my grave later. That sword is my life and blood, you've better guard it with your life." Naruto's face faltered and he asked, "Huh? You're the one that said you want to see Haku again and that's the first word you said to her?" Zabuza complained, "Shut up, kid. She's my tool and she'll follow my instructions." Enraged, Naruto hurried forward and yelled, "What?" as he pointed to Mikoto and Sasuke, who were still hugging each other. "That's how you're supposed to treat someone important to you. Haku's not your tool or anything." Kakashi appeared behind Naruto and held him back, saying, "Naruto, calm down." "But," objected Naruto. As Haku knelt before Zabuza, she said, "It's okay, Naruto. It's good to see you alive again, Zabuza-sama." "I am not totally alive, Haku, and from what I heard, I could only stay in this form for a while. My real form is a phantom, a spirit," Zabuza said. "Naruto is the only one who could summon me once a day, and I've swore fealty to him in a pact between summoner and spirit. This is my order to you, Haku. Protect Naruto with your life and listen to his orders. He's the only one who could summon me and I am not yet ready to leave this world." "I'll do as you say, Zabuza-sama." Haku bowed her head. "As long as he could make you alive again, I'll follow Naruto's orders as well." With a disapproving expression on his face, Naruto observed Zabuza's treatment of Haku, but he remained silent while Kakashi held his hand on his shoulder. When Mikoto finally held her son away and dried his tears, she said, "Sasuke, enough bawling." She looked around at everyone. "Our time is short, we need to begin discussing what has happened." Kakashi nodded courteously and said, "I was waiting for you to be ready, Mikoto-san." As Mikoto approached, Sasuke dutifully followed, seemingly terrified that his mother would vanish at any moment. Mikoto said, "Very well. As you all know, Zabuza and I are technically dead, as such we only exist in this world as phantoms, or in other words, spirits that do not want to enter the afterlife." Mikoto clarified. "When someone died, they are given a choice by the death gods. We're allowed to choose if we'll stay on in this world as phantoms, or move on to our next life." Turning back to face Sasuke, Mikoto remarked, "For me, my choice was obvious. I could not leave my child alone. Even though he could not see me, I was constantly by his side." Zabuza made the same choice for Haku. Zabuza simply grunted and averted his gaze, but Haku's head lowered even more as tears filled her eyes. "There is a spirit plane which all spirits could go to. We call it the Death Realm, where the spirits who did not wish to move on will linger and gather around. It is from there that I first heard of the soul summoners. People with special bloodline that could see the dead as well as summon them if a pact between them is formed. The bloodline is outwardly visible. Those with the bloodline have bright green hair and eyes," Mikoto said while everyone was staring at Naruto. According to rumors, these bloodlines were formed through the powers of the death gods and one of the elemental energies present in all realities colliding with one another while they course through a person's body. What elemental energies form the bloodline will affect the innate powers of the soul summoners, Mikoto stated. One soul summoner in particular, a young girl named Morona, rose to fame in the spirit plane and, after defeating the demon overlord Baal, a plethora of spirits joined her in service. It seems that one of her loved ones was killed in a duel between a death god and her ancestor, a healer. Her soul summoner bloodline was created by the collision of her healing and death energies. Morona, her descendant, was so skilled at using healing energies that she was able to bring the recently deceased back to life. If she hadn't been from another reality, I would have gone with her. Another well-known soul summoner, whose bloodline was created by the elemental energies of death and earth flowing through him, was able to change the earth itself and trigger violent earthquakes that altered the world's topography. I'm not entirely sure what transpired in Naruto's case. Seeing the warning expression in Kakashi's eyes, Makoto trailed off, coughing as she skipped over the part about the Kyuubi. I did not see any death gods during the battle. All I felt was the chakra. All I felt was a strange chakra from Naruto before he changed. Kakashi's eyes took on an odd expression as he gazed at Naruto's stomach, where the seal holding the Kyuubi was placed. Since the fourth Hokage was his sensei, he was one of the few people who knew the truth about the Kyuubi's sealing, which was that the seal used to trap it was created using the energy of a death god, at the expense of the fourth's life. If Naruto's innate powers were formed from the Kyuubi, Kakashi wondered what that could change Naruto into. He turned to listen to Makoto as he decided to discuss the matter with the Hokage once they reached Konoha. Could the death god's seal have interfered with the Kyuubi's chakra? The tailed beasts were known to be chakra beings made from vast elemental energies. Makoto went on to say, I found no soul summoners during my wanderings in this world, though several exist in other worlds and realities. I realized right away what had happened when Naruto was physically altered during the battle with Haku and was able to see me. With what little I knew about soul summoners, I was able to convince Naruto to call upon me to assist in Haku's defeat. Unfortunately, there's a time limit that a spirit could remain in the temporarily body the summoner had created. The more powerful a spirit was before his death, the shorter the time he could spend in a temporarily body. For me, I could only stay in this temporarily body for at most half an hour. Makoto said as Sasuke clenched her arm. Sasuke stated urgently, but what does that mean? Instead, you'll disappear again. Makoto calmly reassured her son, saying, Don't worry Sasuke. I will need a day's rest before Naruto could summon me again. The spiritual energies of the phantoms are identical to those they had at the time of their death, according to what I've learned, and the more spiritual energies a phantom possesses, the more difficult it is for a temporary body to contain that much spiritual energy. Theoretically, a phantom could eventually be able to synchronize with their temporary bodies in order to stay in the world for a longer period of time, but that would take a long time because phantoms in temporary bodies will become stronger as they fight, and they would carry these enhanced spirit energies with them when they return to spirit form. Which implies that when they were called upon again, they would have to contend with more spirit energies. I spent the whole of yesterday night sourcing for information about the soul summoners and gained some valuable data. Theoretically, Naruto could use his bloodline to punch a hole in this reality to connect to the spirit plane. This could allow spirit energies to flood into the world, which will permit phantoms in a spirit energy-rich area to take physical form. Makoto clarified. The majority of soul summoners establish a place of residence, erect barriers around their compound, and blast a hole into the spirit plane to let in the spirit energies. This allows the vast spirit energies to be stored in their compound rather than dispersing into the world, even after the hole to the spirit plane is healed. Holes in realities heal surprisingly quickly, so the spirit energies will disperse after a short while. This way, any phantoms sworn to Naruto could reside in the spirit compound that he had created, and they will be able to manifest a physical body for themselves. Makoto further explained. Because of the high concentration of spirit energies, phantoms could retain their physical forms all the time while they're inside the compound. The realization caused Sasuke's eyes to widen. The Uchiha compound is big and deserted now. You could resurrect yourself if Naruto moves in and creates the spirit energy thing. I refuse to relocate to the Uchiha compound. Makoto shot him a pleading glance, but Naruto objected nonetheless. It would be nice if you would be able to create a high spirit energy area where we phantoms can walk freely again. Makoto replied. The Uchiha compound is walled and there's little risk of anyone outside spotting us. It is the perfect place. We'll discuss this with the Hokage once we get back. Kakashi intervened. But what I need to know is if Naruto's is able to summon everyone who had died. No, only those with whom he had made a pact and those who had remained phantoms could be called upon. It was not possible to call forth those who had already transitioned to their next life, Makoto clarified. That is still an incredible amount of power, Kakashi said thoughtfully, glancing at Sasuke and Haku. In the meantime, I need Sasuke and Haku to swear never to tell anyone else about Naruto's bloodline. It is a high-level secret, in my opinion, and anyone who divulges it will face consequences. Makoto firmly stated, Sasuke, you must promise this, it is important. Zabuza stood next to her and looked at Haku. Zabuza stated plainly, "Don't tell anyone this secret." "Yes, Zabuza-sama." Haku nodded and remarked, "I'll carry this secret to my grave." As he was supposed to, Sasuke said, "I promise not to tell anyone." When Zabuza's form started to shimmer, Sasuke's eyes grew wide. Gazing down at his fuzzily vanishing body, Zabuza remarked, "I guess my time is up. See you tomorrow, Haku." As Zabuza vanished and the kunai that had temporarily provided his body materialized in midair, Haku said, "Yes, Zabuza-sama." She swiftly grabbed it and held it near to her heart. Makoto turned to Kakashi and Naruto and said, "Zabuza's apparently more powerful than me, seeing as he reverted back to phantom form first. I'll probably have a few minutes left," Makoto said. "Pay close attention to what I have to say." The ability of Naruto to temporarily give spirits bodies through inanimate objects is known as confinement in the spirit plane. The status of the body itself is affected by the objects used as the temporary body. For example, my current body is made of a kunai, which gives my skin more toughness but reduces my overall speed. For example, if you put me in a weed, my speed will rise at the expense of my strength. I don't know how or why, but all objects are thought to contain metaphysical energies that, when they temporarily take on the form of phantom bodies, will influence the confined phantom's strength, speed, intelligence, and other characteristics, Makoto said. But how would he know which objects would create what kind of temporary bodies? Kakashi observed, "This will be important if Naruto needs to apply his bloodline in a battle scenario. He would have to discover that for himself." Even as her physical form started to haze, Makoto stated, "My time is almost up. Soul summoners are supposed to be able to sense these kinds of things. I have one final thing to tell Sasuke." "Mother, what is it?" Sasuke asked, gazing up as though he was trying to commit her face to memory. Sasuke started to object, but Makoto insisted, "Forgive Itachi, Sasuke, he's not the one that killed the clan." While Sasuke stared blankly as Makoto's body vanished and a kunai materialized and fell to the ground, Kakashi jerked at the words and looked at Makoto in disbelief. "Naruto, what did she mean?" Kakashi turned to face Naruto and said. Before turning back to face Kakashi, Naruto glanced at Makoto's ghostly form next to him. "She isn't communicating with me. She claims that tomorrow she will discuss this in person because it is a significant matter that requires direct communication," to which Naruto responded. "I see," Kakashi said, his expression solemn. "Who killed the clan if Itachi didn't?" Sasuke asked softly, looking defeated. Sakura ran to the bridge, huffing. Tsunami informed her that Kakashi and the others had left for the bridge a long time ago, presumably to assist with its construction, when she had returned home from her training in the afternoon. As she got closer to the bridge, Sakura stopped, staring at the scene before her. A sizable contingent of the village kids gathered in front of the bridge, marveling at the bridge's construction. Because there were currently about 100 Narutos running around the bridge, carrying materials, banging metal, and singing loudly and boisterously, it was somewhat inspiring. "That's amazing!" exclaimed one of the kids passionately. "I want to be a ninja when I grow up." "So do I!" exclaimed the other children. She jumped in surprise when she heard a voice behind her say, "You should go and help the other Sakura. You can train your physical muscles at the same time." Kakashi-sensei was reading his orange book when she turned around. Naruto, Sasuke and Haku are doing a good job of speeding up the bridge construction, but they could always use an extra pair of hands. Sakura questioned bewilderedly, "Haku? I thought she's our prisoner? And if everyone is helping out, what are you doing here?" As his visible eye curled into a smile, Kakashi said, "I've come to an agreement with Haku. She'll be accompanying us back to Konoha after all of this is over. Since she's technically not a missing nin, she can be recruited as a ninja for Konoha. As for me, I am supervising. Someone needs to be telling all of you what to do." After giving Kakashi a shady glance, Sakura stalked off in search of Sasuke toward the construction site. As she got closer, she noticed Haku forming ice on the bridge's floors, which the many Naruto used to slide big stone blocks in the direction of the bridge's incomplete sections. In order to construct the bridge, Tazuna and the villagers worked diligently, lifting the stones and pounding metal with the help of Naruto's and Sasuke. An excited chorus of Naruto clones exclaimed, "Hello Sakura!" upon seeing her, "Came to help out?" Sakura clapped her hands to her ears in response to the loud noises of Naruto's coordinated shouts, saying, "Stop that! It's creeping me out, and please, only one of you speak at a time. I thought Haku's supposed to be covered in chakra seals?" After pausing to exchange glances, one of the Naruto clones approached Sakura and assumed the role of spokesperson for all Narutos. But Haku responded more quickly. Haku turned to Sakura and nodded, saying, Kakashi had taken off the seals because Naruto-sama is my master now. I shall serve him with all my life. Sakura recoiled in shock. Something about that sounded incorrect to her. She had unexpected visions of Haku in a maid uniform. Sakura asked in a perilous tone, "Naruto, what in the world is going on?" As she turned to face the numerous Narutos, wild theories already churning in her mind. With a recognizable sparkle in her eyes, she clenched her fists and strode menacingly in the direction of the Naruto spokesperson. "No, no," hurriedly said the Naruto spokesperson. "What Haku meant is that she's a friend now. Kakashi removed the chakra restrained seal when she pledged her loyalty to us. Haku started, but I only, before one of the Naruto clones approached her to silence her. The clones did not want to see Sakura on a warpath. The head belonged to Naruto, and there was typically a lot of head banging. The Naruto next to her successfully diverted Sakura's attention by saying, "Sakura, Sasuke needs someone to hold the iron while he uses his fire technique on it." Sakura's eyes shone brightly. Sakura turned her head around at the prospect of working beside her crush. Sakura glared at the clones and demanded, "What? Where is he?" She started running as soon as Naruto gestured toward the distance, causing the group of Naruto clones to exhale in relief. One of the Naruto clones complained, "You know, I hate using Sasuke as a distraction when we're supposed to win her love. But sometimes it's the only way to get her mind off something." A girlish yell from Sasuke could be heard in the distance, but all of the Narutos quickly ignored it. Everyone went to bed feeling bloated because Tsunami had prepared a substantial meal. Sasuke spoke up next to Naruto, who was cuddling under his bed linens. "You're moving into the Uchiha compound when we get back to Konoha." Sasuke made a firm statement that left little opportunity for protest. Naruto sighed in frustration, wishing he didn't have to live in Tezuna's house in the same room as Sasuke. Naruto turned to his left, where Makoto's phantom form had taken up residence in a corner to keep watch over the boys, and he asked, "I am not, right Makoto-san?" Makoto smiled gently at Naruto and said, "We'll decide when we reach Konoha." Sasuke got out of his bed linens and asked excitedly, "My mom's here now? You can see her?" Sasuke had a happy expression on his face that was almost alien. Naruto would have assumed Sasuke was a fake if he hadn't known any better. Naruto said somewhat sourly, "Yeah, she says we can decide when we reach Konoha." He had been depending on Sasuke's messages to Makoto all day, and it was becoming a little exhausting. As Kakashi stated, he truly understood the clones' memories when they dispelled everything, even though it had been one of his clones that carried out the message passing on the bridge the majority of the time. Sasuke harping next to his ears at night was the last thing he needed after suffering a migraine the size of the Hokage mountain. Sasuke persisted obstinately, "You're going to live in the Uchiha compound." Naruto snarled and said, "Sasuke, if you don't shut up and let me sleep, I am not going to summon your mother tomorrow." Sasuke sulkily wriggled back under his bed linens and instantly fell silent. The weary boys fell asleep in a matter of minutes, one of them dreaming of his parents' appearance and the other of better times spent with his mother. Few spirits would reside in the far reaches of the Death Realm, where Makoto found himself drifting. She searched blindly for the person she was looking for because of the oppressive darkness that pervaded everything. Even though the majority of people had the option to die as a phantom, very few people choose to do so unless they had a significant reason for staying in this world. When the other members of the Uchiha clan went on to their next lives, she was the only one left. When Fugaku passed away, he saw his favorite son standing next to the man who had murdered them. Fugaku, devastated by the betrayal, had accepted the death god's invitation to leave. Makoto was the only one who sensed that something was wrong with the situation as a whole, and she could not bear the idea of abandoning her youngest son. So she had stayed, and in the years she had spent as a ghost, she had finally figured out what had actually happened that night. Makoto had caught a glimpse of another phantom she had known in her life when Sasuke joined Team 7 and was taught by Kakashi Hayate. They had rarely spoken because the phantom was a man of few words, even though both were now haunting their children. Over the past few months, he had given her much needed company because Konoha had surprisingly few phantoms. She had few phantoms to talk to because most of the ones that had stayed had either moved on or permanently left for the Death Realm. Finding the phantom that haunted Kakashi was a challenging task because he also had a tendency to vanish from the real world for days at a time. Fortunately, Makoto was somewhat aware of his location because he had taken her to his thinking spot a few times. Makoto approached it urgently, and she saw a glimmer of light in the shadows. She emerged from the shadows and entered what appeared to be a modest camp area. When she abruptly entered, the white-haired man sitting next to the fire looked up. Astonished, the man said, "Makoto, why did you come here? Did something happen in the real world?" Makoto sat down next to her old spirit friend and said, "A lot of things had happened, Sakumo. You need to return to the physical plane. There's someone I want you to meet." As Naruto woke up, he heard a voice say, "Naruto." Naruto awoke drowsily and asked, "HRNH?" as he noticed the sun had just begun to rise and glanced out the windows. Naruto muttered wearily as he turned to face Makoto, who was rubbing his eyes. "What's the matter, Makoto-san?" At the sound of Naruto's voice, Sasuke awoke from his slumber and turned to face his teammate. Makoto pointed to the 3 new spirits behind her and said, "I found 3 new recruits while scouting around in the Death Realm yesterday night." Naruto looked in their direction. One was a stern-looking woman with brown hair who nodded at Naruto, and the other was a young boy who appeared to be wearing spectacles and carrying a big knapsack. The final one was a man with white hair and a ponytail who appeared to be looking directly at Naruto. Though he wasn't entirely sure why, Naruto frowned as he studied the man's face and felt a sense of familiarity arise. Makoto introduced the 3, turning away from Naruto and speaking the last phantom's name while appearing somewhat evasive. "Meet Cain the Phantom Merchant, May the Healer, and Sakumo the Ninja." "A merchant, a healer, and a ninja?" Naruto asked, staring at Makoto as though she were insane. "I can see the healer and ninja part, but what do I need a merchant for?" As Phantom Merchant, Cain has a special ability. He's able to convert any physical objects into phantom energies, as well as converting these phantom energies back into physical objects. Makoto clarified. Phantom merchants are known to travel the realities collecting stuff to sell. The stuff he collected can be sold to phantoms as well as soul summoners. Phantoms? Astonished Naruto. What do you need physical objects for if you're dead? The Death Realm is an infinite space filled with massive spiritual energies. Phantoms who live in there are able to manifest physical bodies, and thus retain their physical senses and desires. Makoto clarified. It's just like a world stretching to infinity, except that it's exclusively for the phantoms, thus the need for merchants to bring in things from the living worlds which the phantoms could not manufacture. Sasuke asked blearily, "Naruto, what's going on?" as he glanced around the empty room and saw that Naruto was the only one speaking to nothing. "Is my mother alright?" Naruto pointed at Sasuke angrily and snarled, "Arg, stop going on about mother this and mother that. Instead, you're driving me nuts. I even have nightmares about you when I was sleeping. Yes, she's alright. She's telling me something important, so keep quiet." Though his eyes narrowed in annoyance at the brush-off Naruto had given him, Sasuke was surprisingly silent as he watched Naruto. Makoto sounded a little protective when she said, "You should be more understanding with Sasuke, he's been through a lot." Although he rolled his eyes, Naruto said nothing. Naruto changed the subject by asking, "So what do I use to buy the items Cain sells? I can't see him taking normal money." "No, he doesn't take money, he takes mana instead. In ninja terms, he takes chakra," Makoto clarified. Mana or chakra is the currency used in the Death Realm. Cain is just starting out in his merchant business, but he assures me that he would get more rare items in stock soon. Naruto turned to Cain, the Phantom Merchant, and said, "Wow, what are those items like?" Cain started his sales pitch by saying, "Well, right now I have some serviceable spears, bows, knives, and swords for sale. I'll be sourcing for armors in the next few days, but I also take requests. Do you have anything you want?" Naruto's eyes brightened and he asked, "Do you sell ramen?" Cain wrinkled his forehead thoughtfully and said, "Well, I can get some in stock if you want. I know a reality where they made a lot of instant ramen foodstuff." Then he smiled at Naruto and went on. "But in the meantime, do you want to look at my weapons?" Naruto asked inquisitively. Okay." Cain gestured with his hand. A mist of some kind started to pour out when the top of his knapsack suddenly flipped open on its own. "From what I can tell of your mana level, these items are quite affordable to someone like you. Do please buy some stuff," Cain replied with a grin. Sasuke, who had been silent the entire time, gaped in surprise when a mist of some kind started to form in front of Naruto. Clangs of metal, a flash of light, and then a vast array of weapons neatly arranged on the mat in front of Naruto. Naruto's face displays a similar look of surprise. As he approached the objects, Sasuke asked slowly, "Naruto, what's going on?" He picked up a shining red knife that particularly caught his attention. Cain warned Naruto, "Do tell your friend that if he damages it, he has to pay for it. So is there anything that caught your eye?" With a look of wonder on his face as he examined the goods on display in front of him, Naruto clarified, "So, I can use my chakra to buy any of these items? Just in case?" Cain looked at Makoto to confirm, "That's what you call mana in this world, isn't it?" She nodded, and Cain went on. "So yes, since chakra and mana are just different names describing the same thing, You can use your chakra for sales transactions. With stars in his eyes, Naruto uttered the words, "Wow," as he started to lift a spear. Sakura started to look at the stairs with a hint of agitation, and Kakashi looked up from his breakfast. Haku, who was sitting next to her, just turned to give her a curious glance. With a faint frown on her forehead, Sakura questioned what her crush was up to. Why isn't Sasuke down yet? Naruto, I can understand if he sleeps late, but Sasuke always gets up before the sun comes up. Maybe I should go and fetch them. Kakashi pushed back his plate and got to his feet, saying, actually Sakura. I'll do that. I need to see if Naruto has any side effects from using so many clones yesterday anyway. Sakura reluctantly sat down and said, oh alright Kakashi-sensei. Knowing his student, Kakashi shook his head, presumably seeking a reason to observe Sasuke in different stages of undressing. Adolescent girls nowadays. Kakashi said, Haku, keep eating your breakfast until I call for you, as he walked past the two girls. Haku bowed and said, yes, Kakashi-san, I'll do that. As he headed for the stairs, Kakashi gave her a nod. He ascended and proceeded down the hallway, pausing outside the room occupied by Naruto and Sasuke. Through the door came the sounds of whispers and metal. Kakashi paused at what he saw and scowled as he opened the door. Naruto and Sasuke were both dressed and awake. The vast array of weapons arranged on the floor in front of the two boys, however, was what stopped Kakashi. Naruto held a spear in his hand and a bow strapped to his back. In the meantime, Sasuke held a red steel-coated knife in one hand and extended the other hand in front of him, displaying a blue glow of condensed chakra. Naruto happily exclaimed, Makoto-san got me 3 more companions. Upon seeing Kakashi. One is this phantom merchant who sells things in exchange of taking our chakra. It's a pretty sweet deal. I got the bow and spear at the cost of just a bit of chakra. I don't even feel drained. Sasuke swayed slightly on his feet and glared at Naruto, gritting his teeth. Maybe next time you should do the paying. It might be little to you, but it's a large chunk of what I have. Naruto said with a rapid shake of his head, nah, you want to buy it, you pay for it. The blue glow of chakra vanished from Sasuke's hand, and the boy staggered backwards in exhaustion as Kakashi moved forward. Kakashi's eyes narrowed as he finished diagnosing Sasuke, rushing forward to feel the boy's pulse and attempt to gauge his chakra level. The boy was swaying a little, and Kakashi held on to him and said, you're suffering from mild chakra exhaustion, what did you just do? With the red-coated knife in hand, Sasuke declared, I paid for the knife from Naruto's phantom summon. Kakashi sighed in agony and shook his head, asking, did it ever occur to you to ask for my advice first before doing something reckless? But Makoto-san said it was okay. Naruto objected, looking sideways as though he was hearing someone. She apologized though because she did not take Sasuke's chakra reserve into account. Kakashi made a hand seal and remarked, I see. Well, since you two are already up, we might as well have the meeting here. 2 shadow clones burst into being and immediately made their way to the door. As his clones shut the door behind them, Kakashi remarked, I've made a clone to get Haku before taking Sakura out for training. That should distract your teammate for a while. The other will stand guard outside the door to prevent anyone from listening in. Naruto, you can summon Makoto and your new friends, but leave Zabuza out till Haku arrived. No need to waste his precious minutes of being in a real body doing nothing. I'd like to see your new phantoms face to face and ask Makoto about yesterday's matter as well. Naruto removed 4 kunais and set them on the ground, saying, alright, I guess Cain. You can keep your merchandise for now. As if being drawn into a tunnel, the lines of weapons behind Kakashi disappeared into a whirlpool of mist. Kakashi turned around as the 4 kunais on the floor shimmered into the physical bodies of 4 different people, but he was still a little surprised by the disappearing mist. He recognized Makoto. A small boy stood next to her. A woman in robes with a severe expression glared at him, and finally, Kakashi felt his entire body freeze. Naruto waved at the 4 phantoms and exclaimed, so Kakashi-sensei, what do you think? My new companions are pretty awesome, huh? Naruto, was Kakashi's slow, emotionless response. He looked up expectantly as his hyperactive student turned his head. Yes? Naruto questioned, taking a step back after noticing the inexplicable expression in Kakashi's eye. Kakashi's shoulders drooped and his voice was thin. Why did you make my father your summon? Without asking for my permission first? He asked. Turning to face the older ninja at the periphery of the phantom group, Naruto blanched. The older ninja, whom Makoto had given the name Sakumo, gave Kakashi a sheepish look as Naruto questioned incredulously, he's your father? Sakumo looked at Kakashi and Naruto and said in a deep voice, hi Kakashi. Don't blame Naruto. I was the one that told Makoto to keep it from him. It's been a long time, and I just wanted to see my son again." An uncomfortable silence was broken by Makoto. "I think you've better talk to your father first, Kakashi. He might only have a few minutes in his physical form, seeing that his chakra and spiritual energies are cage level." Makoto gave a soft injection. "Me and the boys will remain waiting here until you get back." With his hands flicking into multiple hand seals, Kakashi nodded slowly while maintaining eye contact with his father. As he disappeared into a whirlpool of wind, Kakashi said, with a note of melancholy, "Follow me, father." Sakumo disappeared from the room as well. After a moment of silence, the door abruptly opened. Haku stumbled into the room at full speed, and everyone turned to stare at him. Haku paused when she noticed that everyone was staring at her. "I apologize for being late. Where is Zabuza-sama?" she said. "What happened? Is something wrong?" Out of the forest, two men emerged, standing silently side by side. Kakashi looked at his father and sighed after a few moments of relaxation. Looked at his father, Kakashi remarked, "You caught me by surprise, you know. I wasn't expecting to see you. But since you're here, I guess that means you didn't choose to move on." With a serious expression, Sakumo remarked, "I guess you can say that." "So you're actually worried about me, huh, father?" Kakashi asked, grinning wistfully as he removed his face scarf. "You can relax, father. I can take care of myself now. But since we've only have a short time, there's something I've always wanted to tell you." Sakumo asked, peering into the distance in silent companionship, "What is it, Kakashi?" As his father turned to face him, Kakashi remarked, "Regardless of all that had happened in the past, you did the best that you could. I understand that now. You've broken the rules for all our sakes, and I am proud of you." Sakumo's eyes widened, then he smiled and turned away. As Sakumo took a few steps and leaned against a tree, he said, "Thank you, Kakashi. I think we have a few more minutes. Why don't you tell me more about your life?" As he started to speak, Kakashi glanced at his father and nodded. The phantoms that had turned into flesh made Naruto's room even more claustrophobic. Fortunately, Zabuza and Haku had employed the body flicker technique and vanished to enjoy their time together. He was left to amuse his two new phantoms while Makoto and Sasuke withdrew to a corner of the room and conversed in low tones. The way the two phantoms are staring at him makes Naruto a little uneasy. "So," he said, smiling wanly at his new friends. "How long could all of you spend in a physical body?" "Well, I don't have that strong a spirit essence, so I can probably stay physical for at least 1 or 2 hours. Cain responded with kindness. "As for me, I am unfortunately just a healer that possessed a moderate level of power. I can do a major healing once a day or fix several minor injuries," Mei responded. "My spirit essence would only allow me to stay in this world for 1+ hour. Naruto said, "Okay," while frantically looking for other interesting subjects. He wasn't particularly good at being social. "So why do you want to join me? I have lived 100 years as a phantom, and have no wish to move on. But the thought of being physical again in the living world drawn me to Makoto's offer." Mei replied with a smirk. "No doubt you'll be swamped with phantoms that wish to join you, but do pay attention to your limits. I've heard that young soul summoners could only bond to 10 or 15 phantoms at any one time. Be wise about whom you wish to bond with, or you might miss out on other phantoms in the future." Naruto exclaimed, 10 to 15 phantoms at most? Makoto-san never told me that? Well, she is a rather young phantom, and truthfully the young ones tend to walk the living world more often than they visit the death realm. She wouldn't be able to gather much information about the soul summoners in such a short time. Mei responded with logic as she went on. Now take Lady Morona for instance. She's one of the most powerful soul summoner of her generation, and I heard she could only bond up to 15 phantoms tops when she's young. Her powers grew rapidly over the years and she's able to bond hundreds of phantoms now. But then she's one of a kind. I doubt you'll be able to match her abilities. Mei's sardonic remark caused Naruto to grimace. She somehow made Naruto think of a particularly strict instructor he had had in the ninja academy, the kind that struck anyone she didn't like with a stick. In front of the stern-looking woman, Naruto felt himself trembling. Cain added diplomatically, I am sure what Mei meant is that your powers will grow with time. Also phantoms would join you for various reasons. The foremost reason is the amount of chakra you spent on giving a phantom a physical body. The phantoms get to keep that amount of chakra, mana energies once they are summoned. They could then use the chakra as currency in the death realm. In a way, you're actually paying each phantom for their services. That's true. Phantoms under the services of a soul summoner could amass great wealth in a short amount of time in the death realm. Mei said next to Naruto. She started to say something else, but was cut off when a gust of wind blew through the room. As the wind died down, Kakashi emerged by the door, appearing noticeably calmer than he had been just moments before. Sasuke and Makoto approached the group and said, "That was fast. That's only like 10+ minutes. Your father must be very powerful if he could only stay in the world for such a short time." Before Kakashi could respond, Makoto informed her son, Sakumo was a rather well-known ninja in the past. In fact, he was the only one, other than the fourth Hokage, who was greatly feared by the rock ninjas. His power is comparable to the Sanin's. Sasuke's eyes widened slightly in surprise and he asked, "Really? But why did they never teach us about him in the academy? I remember the history lessons about the fourth Hokage, and I think I roughly know the history of the Sanins, but I've never heard of a ninja called Sakumo." Makoto gave Kakashi a sympathetic glance and remarked, "There was an incident long ago, and it's personal. But whatever you might hear in the future, Sakumo is a great ninja until the very end." With a look of gratitude in his eyes, Kakashi said, "Thank you Makoto for your words. But how about we skip the part about my father and move on to the part where you explain about the Uchiha massacre? You don't have much time left, and I want to know why you said Itachi was not the one that killed you." Sasuke shuddered but said, "Yeah, I saw everything. I saw him kill you, I saw." Makoto touched Sasuke's shoulder and interrupted, "What you saw was an illusion that was planted by your brother. Before your father and I were killed, you were already knocked out. Itachi only woke you later. In my phantom form, I saw him using his Sharingan on you as he planted that false memory in your mind, before leaving you beside my body, covered in blood." Sasuke stepped back in disbelief and asked, "What? But why would he do that? I suffered through the memories, almost every night." Makoto looked down at the floor and said softly, "Because that's what he wanted you to do. But to explain, I've to start at the beginning, before the killings happened. When I first died, I have no idea what was going on as well. It was only later as I wandered the world as a phantom by your side that I finally pieced together the truth. Or at least most of the truth. It all began roughly a month before the massacre. All of the Uchihas were gathered by the Uchiha council members and were told that we are going to revolt against Konoha by force." Sasuke's face turned pale and he yelled, "What?" Kakashi simply leaned against the wall and gave Makoto a gloomy look while focusing entirely on her. Makoto looked at Sasuke and uttered the words painfully. Most of the clan did not know that the plan had actually been put into motion several months back. All were forced to agree to this clan mandate. Those who refused were threatened. "Do you remember your uncle Itachi? He was a kind man who spoke up against the idea of the clan rebelling against Konoha. But a few days later, before he could even do anything about the clan's plans of taking over Konoha by force, he broke his neck while out gathering herbs in the woods." With a horrified expression on his face, Sasuke said, "No," as he understood what his mother was attempting to convey. Kakashi said bluntly, looking to Makoto for confirmation, "He was killed." Yes, he was one of the Uchiha that vocally opposed the plan. After his death, several more accidents occurred. To those who disagreed, Makoto groaned. "Itachi suffered a painful blow as well. It was much later that I discovered your father had ordered Shisui to take out Narita after her father died." "Who's Narita?" Kakashi inquired, observing that Sasuke appeared to withdraw at Makoto's utterance. "I recognized Shisui Uchiha of the body flicker, supposedly Itachi's closest companion. But he was rumored to have died before the massacre by Itachi's hands." Makoto looked away with pain in her eyes and said, "I can't be sure if Itachi really did kill Shisui. I wasn't a phantom then, and I've found no solid proof over the years of that. But I wouldn't be surprised if he really did kill him." With a tear streaming down his cheek, Sasuke said, "Narita, Sister Narita, was Itachi's betrothed. She was one of the few grown-ups that were nice to me. Itachi loved her more than anything. I remembered her funeral. Itachi specially brought a large woven lavender wreath to adorn the gravesite. Lavender flowers were her favorite." Narita's father was Taichi Uchiha. She had been planning to lead a resistance after her father's death. Unfortunately, she never got the chance. After her death, well, no one else had the guts to oppose the elders in Fugaku. Makoto grumbled bitterly. But that was the start of it all. When the third Hokage began having peaceful talks with the Uchiha clan, Itachi started acting strangely, and some even believed that he sold out the clan. Shisui was tasked with keeping an eye on Itachi's whereabouts, and he died soon after from a rumored suicide. By that time, the clan was prepared to implement the plan. Prior to a full-scale assault on the Hokage and the Konoha Council, the Hokage's loyalist clans would first be poisoned and killed while they slept. But a few days before the start of the plan, the whole clan was the one attacked in their sleep. A clan-wide ninjutsu was cast on the clan compound, trapping all sounds of the slaughter as well as confine all the Uchihas in the compound. That's why no one knew what was going on in the clan until the next day. Itachi was the one that cast the chakra barrier. Makoto continued. She went on after noticing the fury in Sasuke's eyes. But the real killer of the clan was the man besides him, someone the clan all thought was long dead, Madara Uchiha. As Makoto continued to tell everyone about Madara Uchiha, Kakashi blinked at the deluge of information she was giving. About the survival of Madara, a legendary figure in Konoha history. She continued by telling them that Madara had joined forces with Itachi to murder the clan. He had listened silently to the side as Makoto explained to the kids, and Sasuke in particular, how Itachi had shielded him from Madara by instilling false memories in his head. She had apparently become a phantom and followed Itachi to the Hokage tower. When Makoto met with Danzo and the two village elders at the Hokage tower, he was shocked to learn that Itachi had indeed betrayed the clan. Makoto had learned from the village council's discussions that Itachi was to command an Anbu army to exterminate the clan on Danzo's and the village elders' orders. However, that is not exactly how things transpired. Itachi never told them that Madara was the one that killed the clan, he just told them that he did not want to stain the Anbus with Uchiha blood and that he was the one who wiped out the whole clan. Makoto replied with a pale face. He had threatened Danzo and the two village elders using his position of authority, saying that if they ever hurt a hair of Sasuke, he would tell all of Konoha's secrets to its adversaries and then kill them himself. What transpired behind his back infuriated the third Hokage, who had entered the conversation somewhere in the middle. It seems that he had hoped for a peaceful conclusion when he initiated the peace negotiations with the Uchiha clan. Then, when Itachi begged the third to protect his brother, he promised to look after Sasuke. With his head bent and tears streaming down his cheeks, Kakashi turned to face Sasuke, who had turned away. Knowing Itachi, it's likely that he created those memories to help you find him later. I followed Itachi when he left with Madara, Makoto said, silently crying, but his loyalty to Konoha was unquestionable, which probably led to why he had done what he did. He was probably dying of guilt at being the cause of death for our clan, and wanted you to be seen as the hero. I found out from their conversation that Itachi found Madara in Konoha a few hours before he was meant to call in the Anbu to deal with the clan. Madara saw Itachi as deserving of being spared because he had acquired the 3-tomo Sharingan, and Madara had disclosed that he was a member of a strong organization called Akatsuki, inviting Itachi to join him. Madara had stated that he had come to destroy Konoha but that he would spare Itachi. For reasons I'm still unaware of, Itachi had consented to join Madara. Makoto stated in a quiet voice, I could understand his reasoning, a little. The clan was already marked for death, he might as well use it to save the village. He had also attempted to convince Madara to kill only the Uchiha clan rather than the entire village. It's not right because of that. Through tears of rage, Sasuke yelled, that doesn't make it right. No, Sasuke, you're right. Makoto sighed deeply and remarked, it is not right. However, the clan was already on the path to ruin. The clan's leaders, including your father, had forgotten what it meant to be a Konoha ninja. So sometimes I even think it's a good thing the clan was gone. We might only have increased the suffering of people on this planet if the clan had survived. Have you ever learned anything about the Akatsuki group? Kakashi asked, cutting off Makoto's reflections as he focused on the information that had been bothering him. Makoto had disclosed information that threatened the village, and he was aware that it was his duty to learn as much as he could and report back to Konoha. No, I've never seen Madara use such a rapid, fire movement technique. Soon after Itachi and Madara left the village, I lost sight of them. I took care of Sasuke as he grew up over the following few years. As a phantom, I can travel anywhere in the world within minutes via the Death Realm, but I couldn't track him down because I don't know where he is. Makoto said, staring at Kakashi with a stony gaze, but over the years, I've discovered some dirty village secrets while as a phantom which could prove useful to Konoha. For example, did you know that Root, the foundation fraction of the Anbu, was never completely eliminated? What? Shaken by the new knowledge, Kakashi uttered a low, pitched curse and inquired, you mean Root was still there? What is a root? The only roots he was familiar with were those associated with plants, so Naruto scowled at the name. What do you know about them? Kakashi turned to Makoto and explained distractedly to Naruto, it was an old Anbu fraction that was supposed to be disbanded a long time ago. Apparently, Danzo had taken the old members of the Foundation and even recruited new ones, making their base in the catacombs beneath Konoha. Makoto grinned grimly and said, I've seen them carry out a lot of nasty operations under Danzo's orders over the years. But my probing has its limits. In order to prevent sound and chakra interference during top secret meetings, Root members use chakra seals. I wouldn't be able to enter the room after the seals were activated if I wasn't there first. Seeing as my main concern was Sasuke and I could only venture into Root's base sporadically, there are a lot of gaps in my information regarding Danzo and Root. With a look of urgency beginning to creep into his eyes, Kakashi stated, Regardless, the Hokage needs to be told of this once we get back to Konoha. Makoto said, her eyes hard. I know, I fully intended to tell the third all that and more. After all, Danzo had a hand in the fall of my clan. Consider it my payback to him. Carrying a makeshift cloth basket of herbs, Haku made her way back to the bridge builder's house in Tazuna. When Zabuza's physical time limit had passed, he disappeared, and Haku had ventured farther into the forest to collect some herbs. She made some poultice for Tazuna as payment for her food and accommodation at his house after hearing him lamenting aching bones on the bridge yesterday. She entered the house and went to the kitchen, where she saw a solitary Naruto eating breakfast. Sasuke and Kakashi were nowhere to be seen when she looked around, and Makoto should have returned to spirit form a few minutes prior. As she removed a bowl and placed her herbs inside, Haku inquired, everyone is out? Yeah, Tsunami and Inari are bringing water and foodstuff to the bridge workers. Cain and Mei decided to visit the village since they have some time left. Sasuke, he heard some bad news, so Kakashi took him out for training. Naruto sighed. She fell silent, and Haku said, I see. A pleasant, lemony scent filled the air as she started to crush the herbs. Naruto eventually started to twitch in the quiet that filled the tiny kitchen. Naruto glanced at his plate and said, you know Haku, it's wrong to kill people, right? Well, there is no right or wrong about killing people. As a ninja, there is only your mission and orders, that is after all the way of the ninja. Haku replied, looking up after a while. After a moment, she spoke again. It is also the way of life in this world. To kill or be killed. Despite his frown, Naruto remarked, but we didn't kill you. Before leaving Naruto alone to finish her poultice, Haku remarked simply, that's true, you didn't. With a determined expression in his eyes, Naruto remarked, well, if killing is the way of the ninja, then I'll create my own nindo. Whatever conflicts there is, I'll do my best to see if there's any other alternatives before I am forced to kill, that is my nindo. Haku smiled encouragingly and said, that's good to hear. You'll be a great ninja someday, I am sure of it. Believe it, boasted Naruto, grinning. I am going to become Hokage, protect my precious people, and change how the ninjas think about killing. That's what I am going to do when I become Hokage. As Naruto emerged from whatever sinister thoughts he had been harboring prior to her arrival, Haku's eyes softened. She concealed a smile as she went back to work after seeing Naruto tackle his breakfast with newfound vigor. They coughed a little. Naruto gazed shyly at her while Haku looked up. Naruto's smile faded as he said, by the way, Haku, do you think you can return me the kunais I used to confine Zabuza? I am starting to run out of them. Sasuke wouldn't let me take back kunais I used to confine Makoto-san either. You're not going to be the same, right? Sakura sank into her blankets with a groan. On the mattress that had been prepared for her, Haku was already fast asleep. Kakashi had led her into the woods for additional tree climbing, making the morning a demanding training session. After 3 hours, he did reward her by teaching her a C-rank genjutsu technique known as the mind-affecting technique. It seems that if the technique was applied correctly, it would cause someone to circle the same area. It was designed as a method to wear someone out both mentally and physically, more like a trap genjutsu than a fighting one. Although Sakura didn't get the technique right the first time, she was sure she could learn it in a few days because she had already committed the necessary hand seals to memory. Following that, the remainder of the afternoon was devoted to assisting the throng of Narutos on the bridge. All day, she had been unable to locate Sasuke. Sakura didn't realize the Kakashi on the bridge watching them was a clone until much later in the afternoon, after one Naruto clone had mentioned that Kakashi wasn't present. Sakura had returned home for dinner with the intention of finding an opportunity to speak with Sasuke, but to her dismay, she had learned that Sasuke had gone to his room early. Sasuke was physically fine, but he needed some time to himself, Kakashi had informed her. Kakashi had given Sakura strict instructions not to bother Sasuke, which had further demoralized her. It is so not fair, screamed Sakura's inner Sakura, a mental picture of a gigantic Sakura clone growing. Sakura sighed softly as she curled up under the covers, acknowledging the words of her inner self. It really is a rotten day. I did learn a new technique, but I didn't even get the chance to see Sasuke the whole day. With a self-righteous rage burning inside her, inner Sakura said, something is going on. There's something that your bunch of loser teammates aren't telling you. I can feel it. Sakura sniffed in frustration as she heard what her inner Sakura had to say. She was aware that strange things had been occurring since yesterday, such as Sasuke abruptly showing civility toward Naruto, who was constantly chatting with the blonde while they were assisting with the bridge construction. Then there was today, when Sasuke had disappeared, most likely to go to some covert training with Kakashi regarding his Sharingan. With his peculiar blue-green eyes, Naruto had also been a bundle of weirdness. After the altercation on the bridge 2 days prior, even his hair had maintained its blonde and green hue. In the afternoon, Naruto confided in her that he was unable to remove the green coloring in his hair. After checking, he discovered that some of his hair, all the way down to the roots, appeared to be extremely green. Then there was the enigmatic woman who had participated in the battle at the bridge and was dressed in some sort of clan garb. It was only after the fog cleared that Sakura had seen her. The female ninja had made a huge fire dragon to battle Gato and his mercenaries, and she had seen it. The woman had not been able to see the clan symbol because she had been too far away. When she had inquired, Kakashi had explained that the woman was a Konoha ninja who just so happened to be in the vicinity on a crucial mission. She had paused to assist them after witnessing the battle's outcome before rushing off to finish her own mission. Sakura thought, "I wonder what is actually going on," and moaned softly, "It's like none of them trust me." Sakura's inner sarcastic remark struck her like a sleigh hammer. "Maybe because you're the weakest of your team, that's why they don't trust you with anything." Sakura retorted angrily, "There's no need to be so rude about it. I am working as hard as I can to improve my skills. When there's another battle, I should be able to at least contribute something to the fight next time round. On the other hand, there's a piece of good news. Tazuna said the bridge would be completed in 5 days' time due to our help. That means I can go back home soon. I rather prefer this more naturalistic lifestyle myself, compared to the bustle of Konoha's busy streets." Inner Sakura said, "I love having greenery close by, the soft green grass, the morning dews of the forest, the..." Sakura closed her eyes and exclaimed out loud, I get it. Now shut up so I can get some sleep. God, whoever knew my inner self is such an agricultural-friendly person." Sakura's gentle snores filled the room a few minutes later. As Makoto cast a sorrowful glance down at the two boys' sleeping bodies, Cain turned to face her. It had been difficult for her to break the news she had shared with them in the morning. May interrupted Makoto's thoughts by saying, "They're asleep, it's time to go now if we're to find some powerful or useful phantoms interested to bond with the young soul summoner." The room was empty except for the 3 phantoms. Sakumo had vanished once more, but Zabuza had chosen to remain with Haku when Naruto no longer needed him. Makoto looked at the sleeping Naruto and nodded, saying, "Yes, let's move forward. Besides finding more powerful phantoms to join Naruto, we also need ways to find out if Naruto's parents had become phantoms. And if we could locate them." May sighed. She had been present when Naruto had discussed his request with Makoto in the afternoon. Now that Sasuke had reclaimed his mother, it was painfully clear to all that Naruto, who had spent his entire life as an orphan, wanted to know who had given birth to him. "I know of a few places in the Death Realms that can help us complete both tasks at the same time," May responded. She knew the Death Realm better than either Makoto or Cain, having spent the last century as a phantom. Makoto linked phantom hands with May and Cain and said, "Take us there then, it's time to go." As they disappeared from the world of living things, a whirl of spirit energy swirled in the air around them. They resurfaced in a section of the spirit plane that May knew well, right in front of a big building with the words, "Phantom Realm Times," written on a signboard. Makoto asked bewilderedly, "A phantom newspaper guild?" Before realizing why May had brought them here and her eyes brightened. "Of course. We can post an advert asking for phantom recruitments and whereabouts of Naruto's parents." "Yes, but posting an advertisement in one of the most prestigious Death Realm newspaper would not come cheaply," Cain replied with caution. "Of course it would be a better way compared to what you did yesterday. Roaming the streets in search of possible candidates is not exactly a sure way of getting recruits, even though it did net me and May." May stated plainly, "Don't worry, the expense for the advertisement will be paid by me." When she raised her hand, a gentle golden glow burst from her chakra. It was the size of a tiny golden pebble in her hand, and the glow grew smaller and smaller. The chakra coin was quickly tucked into her pouch. "I had been saving up my chakra whenever I am in my physical form in the Death Realm for the past century. I have enough saved up to spare for a small advert. Moreover, I can always regain the chakra that I've spent from Naruto. That child is a chakra monster. If he gave me half of his total chakra for 3 days, it would be enough to cover the cost." "Then let's do it," Makoto stated. "The faster Naruto had powerful phantoms to protect him and my son, the more at ease I would feel. I do have my own savings of chakra and I can lessen the expense if needed. Then while the two of you go posting advert in the Phantom Realm Times, I'd better make a move to get more stocks to sell," Cain replied gently. Makoto nodded sympathetically and said, "Ah yes, you did tell us you were stopping over here to transverse to other realities. Good luck with your item gathering." As he focused on the reality he wanted to transcend, Cain answered, "Thanks." He already knew where he would be able to collect some possible items for sale. Mei and Makoto had started to leave him and enter the newspaper building. He reappeared inside a large building and felt the waves of the vast energies of realities wash over him in a matter of moments. Gazing at the wall, mounted signboard, Cain smiled as he read the words. He had spent enough time in this specific reality to be somewhat familiar with its languages. Cain cheerfully read, Tokyo Good Taste Noodles. Warehouse 18. Guess I am at the right place. Now I just have to hunt down those ramen. After seeing the look on Naruto's face when he had mentioned ramen, it's going to be a confirmed hot seller item. Cain finally found rows of plastic wrapped ramen boxes stacked in multiple large crates. After searching for several minutes, he went over to one of the crates and started engraving a spirit seal on it. It was not an easy task to gather things from reality. In order to transform the object into controllable phantom mist at his command, the phantom merchant had to first mark the object in question. Then, over the course of the following few hours, he had to spread his spirit essence into the object through the seal, assimilating it into himself. When a phantom merchant sells his goods, he transfers the seal's mastery to the buyer, who can then summon the item in either physical or phantom form. That was a major factor in the phantom's ability to form bonds with soul summoners and the fact that phantom merchants were always able to find employment with them. Both the death realm and the living world might contain phantom purchased weapons. Essentially, instead of having to equip the phantoms each time they were called upon, soul summoners would be able to call forth a small army of phantoms with potent phantom weapons on the battlefield. An object could change from physical to phantom and back again with a single thought from the phantom merchant in control of it once it had been marked and absorbed by a seal from the phantom merchant. Naturally, however, assimilation takes a long time, and the seal would be broken by even the smallest movement of the object. Based on the size of the ramen crate, he would need more than 4 hours to absorb the entire physical mass. Cain sighed as he poured his essence into the crate through the seal he had drawn and said, "Well, I've got to get to work. I'll just have to make sure to extort some good prices from my summoner later." When the guard saw Gato approaching their fortified and hidden compound with his army of mercenaries pulling him along, he climbed down uneasily. 2 days prior, Gato had ordered the compound to be placed under lockdown until he returned with more than 60 of the guards and mercenaries. It's true that none of the guards left had anticipated Gato's prolonged absence, but none of them had the audacity to propose stealing anything that belonged to Gato. Because of his strong connections to the underworld rather than his prowess as a trader, Gato was one of the wealthiest merchants in the elemental nations. His true exports are women and drugs. The compound's guards had been with Gato for years and were aware of his brutality in pursuing those who had wronged him. As he entered the gates he had just unlocked, the guard said, "Gato-sama, you have returned. The conquest of the Wave Village was successful?" With a cruel laugh, Gato waved to the mercenaries he had brought back behind him and said, "Yes, the village has been destroyed. That would teach those vermin who had dared to stand against me. Gather the remaining men in the compound, will you? I have something to tell them." The guard hurried over to the big battle drum and started beating on it, saying, "Yes, Gato-sama." The drum's loud sound was a standard call for all of the men to gather in front of the compound. After a few minutes, the men gathered in front of Gato and the mercenaries he had led to Wave Village, waiting for further orders from the guard and the drum. Gato sighed and gave the men gathered in front of him a fleeting look of remorse after counting the 19 men in front of him. The men were trapped in the ice dome formed by the large ice mirrors, which seemed to chill the air itself. As the mercenaries behind Gato disappeared into thin air and Gato transformed into the ninja Haku, the guard exclaimed in disbelief, "What is the meaning of this?" One of the missing ninjas that Gato had set out to kill from his fortress was the feminine-looking ninja. With sad eyes, Haku blurred into motion and said, "I am afraid I would have to kill you. It is Zabuza-sama's request." Unpredictably, a shower of ice senbons hits the men, preventing them from reacting. All 19 men were dead on the compound's stone cobbles 5 minutes later. As she pulled out a piece of paper on which Zabuza-sama had jotted down his directives from their brief meeting yesterday, Haku cast a sorrowful glance at the bodies. As she approached the massive mansion where Gato once resided, Haku said in a monotone, "First, kill the guards at Gato's compound, then, steal his wealth." She already knew what Zabuza had written by heart, so she didn't read the rest. "And then use the wealth and gain Naruto and Konoha's trust." A lengthy line of eager candidates was already forming outside Mei's house just a few hours after the advertisement was published in Phantom Realm Times. In the advertisement, Mei's home was used as the location for the interviews with Phantom hopefuls. The interviewed Phantoms would be added to Naruto's Phantom crew if they were able to win over Makoto and Mei. Already, Makoto had failed the first 5 incoming Phantoms. The main reasons they failed were that they were either too mentally unstable, too weak, or lacked any useful skills to be around Naruto and Sasuke. Mei yelled, "Next," as she ushered out the fifth applicant they had just interviewed and opened her door. A tall man with long black hair tied in a tail behind him entered. He was identified as a Hyuga by the glistening whiteness of his eyes. Makoto gasped in surprise as she saw him and jumped up instantly, knocking over the chair behind her for the moment. She recognized the man as one of the few phantoms that had survived in Konoha but had quickly disappeared from the world a few years prior. Even though their clans were fierce rivals when they were alive, she and he were on speaking terms, albeit not exactly friends. Looking at Makoto, who was still stunned by his appearance, the man grinned and said, "You look good, Makoto. But I would never have imagined that the abilities of a soul summoner would appear in the village's demon container. And that you would be the one that discovered it." As he moved forward, Makoto clasped his hands and said, "Hizashi, I thought you've moved on." She smiled brilliantly at him. "Although we have a lot to catch up on, how would you feel about joining Uzumaki Naruto's Phantom Army for the time being? Does anyone know where Haku is?" Naruto asked anxiously, scanning his surroundings in the hopes of spotting the missing female ninja prowling around. The group was all working on the bridge construction, and it was already late in the afternoon. He hadn't seen the girl all morning, and none of the phantoms had been present all day either. Sakumo was the only one who had vanished, though, as soon as Naruto had given him a physical body so he could spend time with Kakashi. Even Sakura was avoiding Sasuke, tired of the gloomy atmosphere surrounding the erratic boy, and Sakumo did mention that Makoto and the others were in the Death Realm recruiting more phantoms for Naruto. Naruto had been reassured that his phantoms did not simply up and leave, but Sasuke had been in a foul mood all day due to not being able to see his mother. "Haku? She did tell me that she has some business to take care of and will return when she's done," Kakashi remarked, raising his head from the book he was reading. "Sensei, aren't you worried that she might flee?" With a worried frown, Sakura asked, her forehead smeared with sweat, part of the cost of working all day in the scorching sun. After giving Naruto a wry smile, Kakashi turned to Sakura and said, "I don't think she would do that. She would gain many advantages if she became a Konoha ninja." "Advantages? Such as?" Sakura inquired inquisitively. Kakashi clarified, "Well, she's at least Chunin level, so she should be able to accept B to D rank missions once she became part of Konoha's Ninja Corp. Ninja mission pay is renowned for being higher than mercenaries' mission pay for a mission of the same level. It is a simple decision for a young girl who is alone in the world, especially when you consider that Konoha can shield her from enemy villages that might be pursuing her due to her relationship with Zabuza." She didn't specify when she would return. Ever determined to learn what he wanted to know, Naruto asked. Without taking his eyes off his book, Kakashi remarked, "No, Naruto, I am not exactly her keeper. If you have time to chat, you have time to help with the bridge building." "There are my clones everywhere," Naruto objected. "There isn't much left for me to do, or Sakura or Sasuke either." With a sigh, Kakashi shut his orange cover book and turned to face his genin team, a smile spreading across his visible eye. "You three will play tag while walking on trees," Kakashi said, gesturing toward the woods close to the bridge. "Well, since you are all free, I suppose we could do some training. Naturally, it wouldn't be that simple, as you would have to simultaneously avoid my projectiles." When Sakura saw the kunai Kakashi had removed to illustrate his point, she grimaced. Sakura said, "You know, maybe helping with the bridge building isn't so bad," as Kakashi started to lead them into the woods. Kyuubi lay in a boneless mass on the floor of his cell, pain coursing through his body. The backlash from his escape attempt 2 days prior, when he had attempted to flee while the child was using his chakra, had pushed him deep into his cell, rendering him immobile. That fucking fourth Hokage didn't realize that a mere mortal could call forth so many death energies from the death god to overcome even the Kyuubi's power. Like a miser counting his gold, Kyuubi painfully turned his head and counted once more. Kyuubi snarled fiercely, 1 tail, 2 tails, 3 tails. Whatever had transpired when his energies clashed with the death gods, it had depleted all of his tails, and his present 3 tails were the first of what had been restored over the previous 2 days. Even though he was a tailed beast and would likely regain all of his tails in a week, he was still unable to accept that the backlash had drained him of all 9 tails of his power, but that was not the point. Kyuubi grunted, partly in anger and partly in dissatisfaction, but mostly because his pride had been wounded and someone was going to pay for it. Maybe he would eat his jailer into bit-sized pieces when he escaped in the future, but wait. No, his jailer wasn't even bit-sized for a creature his size in the first place. Maybe he would squash his jailer flat like a bug. Because of his present wounds and inability to control his own chakra, Kyuubi never sensed the presence of another type of energy coursing through his jailer's body as he lay on the floor planning his tasty retaliation. The soul summoner skills were the result of the fusion of the energies of the death god and the Kyuubi, an elemental beast, and a new power was born from this new bloodline, derived from the inherent qualities of the Kyuubi's energies. The force of creation and destruction. As the three genins staggered back to the bridge builder's house at the end of the day, Naruto moaned, "I am never going to initiate a training session with Kakashi-sensei again." Tazuna had gone out for a drink with the villagers, leaving the three genins alone, and the Kakashi clone had dispelled himself without telling them where the original was. Sakura winced as she massaged the darkening bruises on her arm, which had been hit several times by Kakashi's projectiles during the afternoon training session. Although Kakashi had at least blunted his weapons beforehand, the force with which the Jonin threw the weapons caused painful bruises wherever they struck their target. I felt more like target practice for Kakashi-sensei. Sasuke strode ahead of Naruto and Sakura, glaring scornfully at them, saying, "Stop being so useless, it's just training." Naruto angrily objected, saying, "Speak for yourself. You were hit as many times as we were." Without bothering to respond, Sasuke entered their accommodation and proceeded to the kitchen, where Tsunami-san usually had their meal prepared by this point. Instead, the three genins discovered a table devoid of dinner, sacks of what appeared to be gold spread out in front of the table, and Tsunami and Inari crumpled in front of an open sack with gold fragments spilling out of it in stunned silence. Sasuke grunted in surprise, and Naruto and Sakura simply froze. As someone descended the stairs, Haku appeared and grinned at them. Haku gave Naruto what appeared to be a bank account book in Naruto's name and said, "Naruto-sama, I have something for you." Sakura, who was looking over his shoulder, squeaked as Naruto opened the account book. 7,999 ryo. Sakura appeared as though she might burst out of her mouth at any moment. "Where did you get so much money?" Haku explained calmly, as though it were all in a day's work. "I have taken over Gato's stash and had divided them between all of us, Wave Village and Konoha. Naruto-sama and Konoha would of course get the bigger portion of course, but there's still a sizable portion of money for each of us." She then gave each of Sasuke and Sakura an account book, and when Sakura opened hers and saw the amount of 897,789 ryo in her name, she was speechless and stunned. Individual accounts are also available for Kakashi, Tazuna, Tsunami, Inari, and the Wave Village itself. Haku pointed to the gold sack behind her and explained, "I have taken the liberty of converting some of the money into gold for Wave Village to use in their rebuilding immediately." Tsunami had started sobbing quietly in joy next to the gold sacks, while Inari was still staring blankly at the gold sack. These bank accounts are well known because of the substantial sum of money involved. Before I left this morning, I took a covert blood sample from each of you. The bank uses the blood to make seals that are attached to the books of accounts you possess. This implies that in order to withdraw funds from these accounts, you will have to visit the bank or one of its nearby branches and provide a blood sample for validation." Haku went on, calmly observing the three genins. Although the Uchiha clan's wealth likely dwarfed the 897,789 ryo that was given to him, Sasuke appeared the most composed of the three. The amount of money, however, was not insignificant. It is the equivalent of at least a few hundred C-rank missions, which is enough to feed a poor village for years. However, wouldn't Gato's men be pursuing you right now? As he struggled to recover from his shock, Naruto inquired. "We all know he's not just some ordinary merchant, he has thugs working for him." In contrast to her modest demeanor, Haku smiled like a shark. Indeed, smuggling drugs and other illegal goods was a major source of Gato's wealth, which is why he always had a group of mercenaries on hand. Ordinary people without combat training might find those lawless men dangerous, but I'd like to see them pursue me. Even though her smile remained calm, Haku's eyes were flinty as she said, "I am sure Konoha would give me adequate protection since a large sum of money is going to them also." With a whimper and a gentle thump, Sakura finally collapsed on the ground, unconscious from the shock, and Naruto stooped to help her to her feet. Nobody knew how long he had been listening, but judging by the expression on his face, he must have heard a good deal of the conversation. "Well, that was interesting," Kakashi said drearily as he entered the house and stood behind the genins. "Sasuke, carry Sakura back to her room. With so much gold in the house, we cannot leave Tsunami and Inari unguarded. Naruto keeps watch over them. In order to call Tazuna back, I also need you to make a clone. We don't need the entire village to be aware of this situation just yet, so don't tell him what happened. Haku, let's go outside now so we can talk." Kakashi stood in the shade of the trees, half hidden by the dusk shadows, his eyes expressionless as he watched Haku leave the house. She appeared composed and at ease, and he was starting to dislike that about the young girl. Despite his years of experience, he was unable to get a good read on the child. Kakashi was given a blue velvet bank account book, just like the others, and Haku said, "Here is your account book, Kakashi-san." Although it was likely a little more than the current total of his wealth, Kakashi did not recoil when he saw the sum of 1,898,789 ryo in his name. "Just now, I looked at Sakura and Sasuke's accounts. Aren't you playing your favorites? The total amount of money isn't split equally," Kakashi noted. "The largest portion goes to Naruto-sama, Konoha gets the second largest, and Wave Village, you, and I split the third portion equally. I've also sealed up all of Gato's properties, but all of these would belong to Naruto-sama, including Gato's large ninja techniques library," Haku said, matching Kakashi's scowl. Tazuna, Tsunami, Inari, Sasuke, and Sakura shared the last portion evenly. "Gato possesses a collection of ninja skills?" Kakashi inquired with a modicum of curiosity. Haku said, a hint of disgust visible on her face, "Yes, with his great wealth, Gato has a tendency to collect a lot of things he had no use for just to prove he could do it." In addition to the library on ninja techniques, he also had a library on ancient histories, which included books that had been removed from the old ruins before the world broke. In addition, he possesses a sizable collection of exotic weapons and multiple personal harems spread across major cities. "I plan to disband the harems as soon as possible." "Harems? Hold on." Before stopping himself, Kakashi said, "No, forget about that. What I'm trying to say is, you didn't come up with this plan, did you?" The air was heavy with tension as they waited for the other to break first. After a few minutes, Haku sighed resignedly. It was quite difficult to glare at someone who only had one eye visible. Haku gave Kakashi a measured look while remaining stubbornly silent. Hoping to distract Kakashi, Haku said, "I could give the harems to you if you want, though you will have to pay for their upkeep on your own. Stop attempting to divert my attention. Zabuza was the one who put you up to this, wasn't he?" Kakashi growled angrily. Evidently unwilling to go into further detail, Haku remarked, "He might have. And since the money is now in our hands, Konoha would be honor bound to protect you from Gato's associates who would be out for your blood once they learned of this," Kakashi said with a scowl as he. "Everyone benefits greatly from it." Haku stated plainly, "Zabuza-sama was just watching out for me. He wanted me to have something to negotiate with the Konoha Council." With a note of rage in his voice, Kakashi remarked, "You might have brought more trouble on us than it is worth." "No, the entire package that I am providing Konoha is not just money." With a smile that made Kakashi shudder, Haku remarked, "But for me to get control over that asset and offer it to Konoha, I would need your help. There is something else of immense value that Konoha would dearly want in their hands." Makoto, who was now in her physical form, sitting on the floor in the boys' rooms with Sasuke leaning contentedly against her, was speechless as she listened to everything that had happened while she was away from Naruto. Naruto was seated in front of her, updating her on the events of the day. Makoto grimly glared at the door and said, "That Zabuza, it must have been his plans." Zabuza had left with Haku shortly after Naruto had given him his physical form, and if Makoto had known what had happened, she would have immediately strangled him, fellow phantom or not. "He just brought more trouble onto all of you," Makoto said. "In order to keep everyone safe, I must locate more potent phantoms as soon as possible." Naruto grinned and added, "But you've already found me a new phantom." He had seen the new phantom, a Hyuga, but Kakashi had swept the man away as soon as he had made the new phantom physical. Hizashi is proficient in the bloodline skill of the Hyuga family and a formidable ninja. Makoto told Naruto, who was grinning at her. He was Jonin level before his death, but I think Kakashi is a bit worried at his request to see his son and brother again. "I don't see how that could be a problem," Naruto replied with a scowl. "That's the exact same thing I promised to you and Zabuza-sama when you became bond to me, to be able to see your loved ones again." "Yes. However, the head of the Hyuga clan is Hizashi's brother. The majority of the ninjas in the village are currently unsure of the Hyuga clan's loyalty," Makoto explained, adding that his brother had grown aloof and reclusive over the years following the deaths of his wife and Hizashi. "I trust Hizashi. He understands the risk should news of your bloodline becomes public knowledge, but I am afraid that same trust does not extend to Hiyashi, his brother. I did not visit the Hyuga clan much, but while I was a phantom wandering the village, the Hyuga clan's stand on neutrality in the village's politics is well known. Konoha's village council is partly to blame for Hizashi's death, and Hiyashi did not seem to have forgiven the village council these past years." Trying to look wisely next to his mother, Sasuke observed, "That could be a bad thing." Sasuke was becoming increasingly obstinate whenever his mother was present, and Naruto simply rolled his eyes at him. Sasuke seemed to be attempting to convince his mother that he was a good son. Makoto simply nodded grimly, oblivious to the play between the two boys. Yes, this is why Kakashi might have taken Hisashi away to discuss some issues. But enough of these worrying matters. How were your day, beside the shock that Haku had caused with her actions? Well, Kakashi told me after dinner that he wanted to vector the phantoms into my training, to see how well we company ordinate together. He needed Sasuke to train with Sakura though, so that she would not suspect anything. Naruto clarified. But he said we could only begin training when we returned to Konoha. With a frustrated expression, Sasuke continued, "It's annoying. I wish Sakura would just leave me alone, which is impossible if we are training together." Makoto warned, "Now Sasuke, your teammate might be an airhead, but she's a good girl. I expect you to treat her with respect deserving of being your team member." Sasuke gave a reluctant response after appearing to be experiencing indigestion at his mother's words. With a forced grunt, Sasuke said, "Yes, mother. Good. In the meantime, both of you keep a lookout just in case anything goes wrong," warned Makoto. "The money you've gotten might prove dangerous to you. Where large sums of money are concerned, the greed of humans knows no bonds. Gato's accomplices might come after you once they knew what had happened." Then Naruto nodded and said, "Yes, Makoto-san." Obediently, Sasuke said, "Yes, mother." Makoto's form started to falter and she said, "Well." She gently pushed Sasuke away. "My time's up, see you tomorrow." The kunai that had formed Makoto's physical body dissolved back into it. Sasuke got it before Naruto, who lunged at the kunai. "No!" yelled Naruto as he seized the kunai's handle and began a tug-of-war with Sasuke over it. "That's my last kunai. Give it back." Sasuke growled and wouldn't let go, saying, "You are rich now, just buy a new one or get one from your phantom merchant instead." "Bastard!" yelled Naruto. "Idiot!" came back Sasuke. The noise of the argument emanating from Sasuke and Naruto's room roused the unconscious Sakura in the adjacent room. Kyuubi shifted. As he lay in his prison, something was triggering alarms in his chakra senses. Having finally recovered another tail of chakra, he was able to control the boy once more. He had a limited understanding of his jailer's condition after he sent thin tendrils of his malevolent red chakra through the seal and through his jailer's body. To his surprise, however, he had found that the boy's body appeared to be mixed with 2 additional foreign chakra signatures in addition to his own. The boy's eyes had one of the chakra signatures attached to them, and it reeked of a death god's energy. Though it felt more chaotic than malicious, the final chakra signature is somewhat similar to Kyuubi's own chakra. Kyuubi experienced a momentary feeling of fear for the first time in his life. Somehow, while Kyuubi was out of commission, the boy who was his jailer had changed. Kyuubi's own chakra was naturally countered by a pair of eyes that somehow continued to produce a chakra similar to the death gods. Furthermore, the boy's body was generating both the typical human chakra and a different chakra that resembled Kyuubi's. The Kyuubi had never heard of 4 different types of chakras in a mere mortal. What had become of his jailer? When Naruto woke up the following morning, he felt a little queasy. His chakra senses appeared to be malfunctioning, and his head was pounding. Hisashi was standing in a corner of the room, staring at him, while Sasuke and Makoto were nowhere to be seen. Hisashi said, "They're downstairs." Naruto looked at him curiously. Naruto nodded and hastily put on his clothes, fastening his weapons pouch before descending the stairs. He regretted a little that he would have to part with the spear and bow that his phantom merchant had given him. However, Kakashi had ordered that the weapons were to remain concealed and sealed in paper, thanks to Kakashi, until they could devise a reason for how the 2 boys obtained them. As Naruto descended the stairs, he was greeted by the sight of Kakashi leaning beside the kitchen doorway while everyone else sat at the tiny table eating breakfast. Kakashi let the boy pass to take his place at the table and remarked dryly, "I see you're up, Naruto. It certainly took you most of the morning to do that." Naruto sat down next to Sakura, who said primly, "You just missed Kakashi and Haku leaving for a mission." Naruto looked at Kakashi by the door and said, "What do you mean? Kakashi-sensei's standing right there." "I am a clone, Naruto. The real Kakashi and Haku have some business to attend to for the next 5 days," drawled the clone of Kakashi. They had already informed Tazuna and Tsunami of it. Of a side note, no one is to tell the rest of the villagers about Wave Village's new bank account until Kakashi and Haku returns. It would be safer for everyone involved. "Yes, sensei," Sakura dutifully answered. Naruto objected, saying, "But you can't last for 5 days. Who will watch over us after today?" The Kakashi clone handed Naruto 4 white sheets with intricate seal designs drawn on them and said, Kakashi had sealed several clones into these papers before he left. Tear one each morning to release a clone. In the meantime, for the next 5 days, it would be bridge building and water walking. While we are away, The safety of the village will rest on all of you." Naruto asked, "Water walking?" As both he and Sasuke became very interested at once. "You mean actually walking on water? Like what you did when fighting Zabuza?" The Kakashi clone nodded and said, "Yes. While your clones help out with the bridge building, I will be instructing all of you near the bridge on the basics of how to walk on water." Zabuza wasn't entirely certain if he deserved this at one point. He had spent the last 4 days interviewing potential recruits for Naruto's army while confined in Mei's home in the Death Realm. After learning what he had ordered Haku to do, the woman with the fiery black hair had been on the warpath. She had sent Haku on recruitment duty because he would be spending the next few days away with Kakashi. After glancing at her face, Zabuza agreed to his punishment right away. He had assumed it would be easy. After all, how hard could it be to find strong phantoms? That was prior to him receiving Mikoto's lengthy list of do's and don'ts, which warned him of what would happen if he didn't strictly adhere to her recruitment requirements. If Zabuza had learned anything early in life, it was that women are inherently problematic, and irate women are even more so. Include the fact that since they were both already dead, he was unable to simply kill this annoying woman this time. During his time in the Death Realm, he had heard from other phantoms that if a phantom experiences severe trauma, they may momentarily vanish. Soul death is the term for the phantom's temporary destruction. It lasts for a few days before they are completely transformed back into their original phantom form. Death would never be final for a phantom. Despite the fact that there were reportedly a sizable number of rogue phantoms participating in this sport, it also rendered killing a phantom rather pointless. Zabuza scowled at the news clipping from the Phantom Realm Times that was the source of his current troubles. Uzumaki Naruto, new Phantom Summoner of Reality 1,798,309, Planet XPE-08 is hiring, is written in bold across the top of the clipping. Recruitment is on a first-come, first-served basis, went on a paragraph of brief text. Before being accepted into Uzumaki Naruto's army, phantoms would undergo a series of tests and an interview. Phantom Summoner Uzumaki Naruto would be able to form a bond with fortunate early bird phantoms. The remaining eligible phantoms would be placed in reserve and bonded with Phantom Summoner Uzumaki Naruto when his summoning limit increased in the future, should the summoner's phantom summoning limit be reached. The interview will take place at Healer's Avenue, House 746, Death Realm, Sector 8946. Any information pertaining to Uzumaki Naruto's family tree would also be subject to a finder fee. Zabuza snorted and shook his head. As of right now, none of Naruto's phantoms were aware of the maximum number of phantoms he could bond with. Since Naruto was still so unfamiliar with his bloodline, he was also unable to ascertain the limit of his phantom summoning abilities. This was the rationale behind the clause, which also explained why the majority of the phantom hopefuls who wished to join Naruto's army were poor phantoms with chakra levels that did not even approach those of Genin's. Because they might be insulted by being placed in Naruto's phantom reserves, none of the strong phantoms would attend the interview. Mei claims that the more powerful phantoms join phantom summoners for the fame and glory of fighting in the living worlds rather than for the chakra that the summoners would grant with each summons. Since they could generate a lot more chakra than the summoning fee while in the Death Realm, it was essentially the reason why strong phantoms would join a phantom summoner. Naruto's own world and reality were the only strong phantoms they could possibly hope to draw in. The promise of these phantoms returning to their former world was the enticing lure. The phantoms from Naruto's world who had come for the interview, aside from Hyuga Hisashi, were primarily civilians or unimpressive ninjas who did not fit Mikoto's specifications. Naruto could always break his current phantom bond in order to form a bond with a more potent phantom, of course. However, breaking existing bonds is strictly forbidden in the Death Realm. If Naruto were to do so and other phantoms found out, his reputation would be destroyed, and no reputable phantoms would ever sign up with him again. Zabuza let out a sigh. He believes it will be a while before another strong phantom is enlisted, given the present abilities and chakra states of the lengthy line of phantom hopefuls. Walking to the front door and hanging a "gone for a break" sign, Zabuza stretched his muscles. He will find some unfortunate phantoms to battle in order to ensure that his skills are not rusting, because interviewing 45 phantoms for a single day was enough to drive him insane. At first, water walking appeared to be a variation of the training for tree walking. It wasn't until his feet sank deeply into the water on his 10th attempt that Naruto realized how foolish his way of thinking was. He was still attempting a water walk at the river's edge, while Sakura had mastered the exercise after 3 attempts and was now walking far from the banks. After walking half the distance between Sakura and Naruto, Sasuke was feeling a little better. As the Hyuga phantom hovered in the air next to Naruto, Hisashi remarked amusingly, "Your chakra control is pretty bad." Mikoto was quietly observing Sasuke in the distance. her expression displaying her pride in her son's achievement. There was no sign of the other phantoms. During the journey to the bridge, Makoto informed him that they were occupied with certain tasks in the Death Realm. Naruto gritted his teeth and said, "I know." He was starting to feel foolish because he found it difficult to even walk a few steps on the water, whereas his teammates seemed to be able to do it effortlessly. It is even worse today. I seem to have trouble holding onto even the smallest amount of chakra. Hisashi activated his bloodline and said, "Perhaps I can help you see what the problem is." As he gazed at Naruto's body, veins started to throb around his white phantom eyes. Naruto looked up at the man with hope, and a slight frown appeared on his face. "That's strange," Hisashi remarked, looking at Naruto while his bloodline was active. "There seem to be 4 different types of chakra mixing and coursing through your body. The majority is a blue chakra, the normal human chakra, the second is a yellow, green chakra which I recognized as the chakra from the Phantom Summoner bloodline. The third is a black dot red chakra that seemed to be erratic in its flow, while the last is a bright red chakra with a malicious feel. It is weaker than the rest and retreat when touched by the yellow. Green chakra, if I was to hazard a guess, that's probably the Kyuubi's chakra. Currently all 4 chakra types are running amok within your body, the reason for your poor chakra control." Naruto exclaimed, "Wow, so I have 4 different chakra types within me. From what you said, 2 of the chakra types belong to my Phantom Summoner bloodline in the Kyuubi, while the third is my normal chakra. So what is this black dot red chakra that you saw?" Hisashi frowned and said, "I am not sure. It could be a side effect of the awakening of your Phantom Summoner bloodline. I would need to discuss it with Makoto and the others when they are free tonight. In the meantime, let's work on your ability to draw and control your 4 different types of chakra. Let's start with your normal blue chakra since that's the one you'll be using for water walking. Now draw on your chakra at my command and retreat parts of it at my word. I will be trying to familiarize you with how drawing of the different chakras feel like." Naruto started to focus and exclaimed, "All right, Hisashi-sensei. Let's do it." The wide-eyed Sakura shot him from a distance, but he never saw it. Hisashi remarked, "Now draw out your chakra and focus at your feet," as Naruto, standing unsteadily on top of the water, started to focus his chakra. "No, hold back some of your chakra. You are drawing too much of your yellow, green and red chakra. They are in a flux that caused your chakra control to be unstable. Good, now most of your chakra that you pushed out is the normal type. Hold it that way." At the end of the day, Team 7 returned to the bridge builder's house feeling extremely satisfied. Naruto had walked farther out into the lake under Hisashi's phantom guidance than Sakura had. Naruto was now more adept at controlling his typical chakra. Previously, Hisashi claimed to have used a mixture of the 4 chakra types, but now he could almost pull out pure strands of normal chakra. After dinner, everyone had gone back to their rooms because the Kakashi clone had already vanished. Naruto then summoned Makoto because they hadn't had a chance to do so all day. The only other phantom in the area, Hisashi, refused to be made physical. Rather, after Naruto persuaded the elder Hyuga to continue teaching him how to control his other chakra types, he stayed by Naruto in phantom form. As Naruto tried a basic leaf floating exercise, he first expulsed his normal chakra to keep it afloat before switching to his soul summoner chakra, which Hisashi claimed was yellow, green in color, while Sasuke and his mother were huddled in a corner of the room enjoying some quality time together. On his 4th attempt, Naruto managed to continuously levitate the lone leaf fluttering in the air above his hand by maintaining a steady stream of his soul summoner chakra pulsing out of his palm. At this point, Naruto realized that the leaf was sending him a sort of feedback as the pure stream of soul summoner chakra touched it. Naruto somehow had an innate sense that if he used that leaf to give a phantom a physical body, the phantom would become faster physically but less resilient to frequent, strong blows. The fact that Makoto had previously informed Naruto that soul summoners should be aware of the metaphysical characteristics of the items they use to contain phantoms also made him realize that this was what she must have meant. After channeling a pure stream of soul summoner chakra into a variety of objects, Naruto discovered that enclosing a phantom in a block of stone would increase their toughness while decreasing their intelligence and speed. On the other hand, a piece of paper would give a phantom a very weak body, both mentally and physically. However, they struck gold when Naruto scanned the paper with the storage seal Kakashi had made for him to keep his bow and spear using his soul summoner chakra. While trying to figure out what kind of body the storage seal could become, Naruto had received an odd feedback from it. Despite the fact that it was odd, the feeling he had was that any phantom that used a storage seal for their body would have amazing properties. The only issue was that Naruto had no idea what those properties were. Despite his impulsive nature, Naruto had only one option for handling this most recent issue. Looking up at the man, Naruto asked earnestly, "Hisashi, Do you mind if I call you out with a storage seal as your physical body? I need to try something. Hisashi, who was unaware of what Naruto had found, shrugged amiably and said, "It's fine with me either way." Naruto gave a nod. He put the storage seal on the floor and called Hisashi inside after receiving permission. Before Hisashi actually stood in the room, there was a whirl of chakra as his body took shape. Before lowering his head to look at Naruto's body, the man appeared somewhat agitated. Hisashi twitched uneasily and said, "I feel something strange with this body, like there's something within me." He waved his hands and staggered back in surprise when a bow and spear, exactly the same as those kept in the seal that now contained Hisashi's body, appeared in midair and then clattered to the ground. Makoto and Sasuke stood up at the distraction and walked over to Hisashi to examine the weapons that had appeared out of nowhere. "What did you do, Hisashi?" "Naruto?" Makoto asked. As he picked up his bow and spear from the ground, Naruto grinned and said, "I just used the storage seal which Kakashi used to store my weapons as Hisashi's body." It seems that Hisashi became a living storage seal when he became physical, able to call up the items stored in the seal. With a frown on his forehead, Hisashi interrupted, "I don't think you fully understand what using a storage seal for a phantom's body will do. The uncomfortable feeling is still within me. It's like I could call up more of the..." When Hisashi extended his hands and a bow and spear, exactly like the ones Naruto was holding, appeared in midair and dropped to the ground, everyone jumped back in disbelief. Everyone just stared at Hisashi, who appeared to be deeply focused, and there was profound silence. When a third set of the exact same bow and spear materialized and fell to the ground, Naruto extended his chakra senses and felt a surge of energy emanating from Hisashi's hands this time. A fourth set, a fifth set, a sixth set followed. Makoto stammered, "Enough, Hisashi," as she fixed her gaze on the man who was scowling at Naruto. Naruto's use of Hisashi as a test subject without prior notice likely infuriated him. "I think we get your point. A phantom whose physical body is formed from a storage seal can create, summon any objects that were originally in it multiple times. I don't think this is the best time or place to test out how many items you can produce with your new body. For all we know, the number could be infinite. Now our main concern should be seeing if these items that you created will remain behind once your phantom physical body reverts back to the storage seal." Hisashi looked thoughtfully at Makoto and remarked, "It shouldn't be long. Give me a few minutes and I will be back in ghostly phantom form." "But if the items remained?" "If the items remained, can you imagine the uses such a body could do? If the world knows of it, there's going to be nowhere for Naruto to run, because everyone would be after him." Makoto replied with a worried expression in her gaze. "Imagine gold stored in storage seals. If the created weapons remains, it will prove that a phantom in such a body could produce an endless supply of gold. Naruto, you'll be hunted down. You've no idea how far human greed spread in this world. We need to keep this a secret. No one outside of this room must know of this, not even Kakashi and certainly not anyone from Konoha." Naruto snapped out, glaring at Makoto, "I am not keeping any secrets from old man Hokage. Instead, I trust him." "Naruto. He's the Hokage. If the weapons really remained after Hisashi disappeared, this is something he must most certainly never know. What if he forces you to use this new ability to produce an endless supply of resources just to make Konoha rich?" Makoto pleaded fervently. Gazing at Makoto as though she were a child, Naruto said slowly, "Old man Hokage is the first person in this world to ever show love and concern for me, long before I was accepted and became friends with others from Konoha. He will not do anything to harm me, I trust him." Helplessly, Makoto started, "Naruto," but Hisashi interrupted quietly. Hisashi calmly looked at Makoto and said, "Let's not argue about this. If Naruto trusts the Hokage, then let us put our trust in the man. From what I know, Sarutobi is an honorable man, and from what Naruto had said, I doubt such a man would abuse Naruto's powers. Anyway, my time is nearly up, let us see what will happen before making any more decision." Hisashi's body unraveled, and a whisper of air was heard. Hisashi's phantom spirit was forced out of his physical body, which transformed back into a storage seal in front of Naruto. The original spear and bow that were kept inside were released when Naruto picked up the storage seal and tore it. Everyone turned to look at the 7 identical sets of bows and spears that were still in the room. Sasuke's mouth opened like a fish as he stood motionless like a statue. The only one to move was Makoto, who closed her eyes wearily and started to rub her head as though she had a headache. As Makoto resignedly put it, "It's up to you, Naruto, we will follow whatever you decide." After a moment, Naruto frowned and lowered his head before raising it to gaze at Makoto, Sasuke, and now, Phantom Hisashi. "We will tell Kakashi and Haku, since they are already in the secret. There's always the risk that once Zabuza knew of this, He might tell Haku, and she might lose any sense of trust she had in us if we remain silent about this. That's why I plan to follow this course of action. This secret will be kept among those in the know until we return to Konoha. Once we return home, we will tell only Old Man Hokage of this new ability of the phantoms. Naruto said with hesitation but with determination. In the meantime, Makoto-san, do you know how to make more storage seals? I think it is time that we try out some experiments. Let's call all the phantoms back. Mei looked at the two boys in front of her and said dryly, you have got to be kidding me. Sasuke and Naruto had sneaked out of the house and decided to meet at a forest clearing. Even though Sasuke couldn't see their phantom forms, all of the phantoms were gathered in front of them. A curious Kakashi clone had been by their side, listening to Naruto explain his newly discovered phantom ability while the phantoms were having their own conversation, because Naruto had also torn one of the storage seals with a Kakashi clone. The clone was in a state of growing shock. Makoto said from next to Sasuke, I am afraid not. A while back, she had transformed back into a ghostly phantom, and then she had hurried off to collect all the phantoms. Hisashi can confirm what is being said. A phantom with a storage seal body can produce whatever is inside the seal originally. The items produced, however, degenerates over time. By the time you've all arrived, the items Hisashi created had already vanished into thin air. And the time it took for all of us to gather was less than an hour. To even replicate items for an hour, such an ability holds unlimited possibilities, especially for a skilled ninja, and if the items sealed are powerful weapons in nature. Sakumo spoke slowly. He frowned at Mei. Why have we never heard of other phantom summoners doing the same thing? We've been scouring the Death Realm for news regarding phantom summoners for the past few days. Something like this, of such an impact, would have raised some flags at least. But there's nothing about this. Cain said, wincing, that's not surprising. This world is one of the few worlds out in the vast infinite realities that utilize chakra manipulation to such a fine art. Seal creation is not exactly something that exists in the worlds where the current existing soul summoners are. If seals can't even be made in their world, how would they even have the chance to find out something such as this? Naruto nodded and cut off the phantom's conversation, saying, that's the reason why I have Makoto-san bring everyone here to do an experiment. After he had finished explaining everything to the Kakashi clone, the latter shrugged and leaned against a tree to watch the performance. She managed to create two storage seals, one which contained a leaf while the other a large rock, and an exploding tag before her physical time is up. What we need to test now is how many times a phantom can produce the object in a storage seal before tiring, or is it an infinite ability? We also have to record the time it took for the items to degenerate, to see if there's a difference between the degeneration of items and its mass. Hisashi would take the sidelines this time, observing those participating in the test to see how much chakra they each used in replicating the objects. We also need to test if other objects with seals would affect a phantom's body differently. Hisashi looked at Mei and the others and said, that's correct. We need two phantoms to be in the storage seal bodies to act as a check system against each other, to find out if the larger an object, the more difficult or lesser than it would be to produce. Mei and Cain is the obvious choice since they can last the longest. We also need someone to test out the exploding tag body. Makoto and me are out since we need to rest at least a full day's rest period before we can be next summoned, and I have other tasks. Sakumo, Zabuza, which one of you would be up to the challenge? With a gleam in his eye, Zabuza said, I'll do it. This sounds interesting. Sakumo shrugged and said, then let Zabuza do it, I'll observe this time round. Sasuke, who was standing next to the Kakashi clone and could not see the invisible phantoms, said impatiently, if you're done talking to Air Dobi, maybe it's time to start the experiments. Mei glared at the boy with the dark hair and said, well, I never. How rude. She sounded very offended. In an attempt to calm Mei, Makoto hurriedly said, I'm sorry. Sasuke had been out all night, and it must be frustrating for him not to be able to see or hear us. She turned to face Naruto and gave him a pleading look. Perhaps it's time to begin. Naruto nodded and positioned the exploding tag Makoto had made in the middle of the clearing before turning to face Kakashi and Sasuke again. We'll start with the exploding tag body then. Since we already know what a storage body will do, let's concentrate on finding out the properties of an exploding tag body before beginning to test the limit of a storage seal body. As he hovered over the exploding tag, Zabuza grinned and said, ready when you are, summoner. Zabuza found himself floating alone in the center of the clearing as the other phantoms started to move away from him. In order to tag Zabuza and the exploding tag, Naruto extended a pure strand of soul summoner chakra. Before the abrupt explosion of fire signaled Zabuza's physical arrival, everything around him was burned to a crisp. There was a shimmer and a blur. Man, I love this body. Zabuza laughed and flexed his muscles while surveying his surroundings. As a result of the explosion brought on by the formation of his body, the air surrounding him shimmered with heat, and blackened grass spread out in a 3-meter radius. Before giving Naruto a serious look, the Kakashi clone muttered dryly, "Makes me glad that I am not standing next to him." That phantom summoning method could be applied to good tactical use. Naruto turned to Zabuza with excitement after nodding, saying, "Thanks. I'll remember that. Do you feel anything different, other than the explosive entry?" Zabuza savored the sensation in his new body and said slowly, "I feel like I am on fire. Like there's this intense fire inside me waiting to be released. Definitely a strange feeling, especially since my chakra element is supposed to be water and I don't know any fire techniques." As he watched Zabuza, Sasuke raised an eyebrow and said, "So you can sprout flames now?" After a moment of frowning and spreading his hands in front of him, Zabuza shook his head. As he made his way to an unburned section of the clearing and tore a piece of grass in his hands, Zabuza partially asked, "No, I don't think the fire can be released just like that. I wonder if I touch something directly, can I burn it?" He straightened and concentrated on it. A bright orange light started to shine on the little blade of grass. With a hiss, Zabuza shook his fingers and dropped the blade of grass. "It's hot." Zabuza staggered back in disbelief as the blade of grass burst in midair, pelting him with a blast of heat. Naruto mumbled in surprise, "You can make things explode. You are literally an exploding tag factory." Makoto raised her eyes to the sky and mumbled, "Oh joy. We should never have put Zabuza into that kind of body." This time, Zabuza picked up multiple blades of grass and laughed, "Ha ha." Zabuza flicked them in the direction of a nearby tree as they glowed a vivid orange. A significant portion of the tree was splintered by the ensuing explosion, and the top half fell to the ground with a loud crash. The Kakashi clone groaned and slapped his hand to his forehead, saying, "This cannot be happening. That idiot is going to wake up everyone in the house and the surrounding areas." Naruto started, but stopped as Zabuza's body flickered away. "Zabuza, you need to stop." After a moment of silence, there was the distant sound of another explosion. Then there was another explosion, and another, and another. The Kakashi clone put both hands behind Naruto and Sasuke and started guiding them back towards the house, saying, "You know what? I think we should head back and continue the experiments tomorrow, since everyone nearby should have been awakened by the loud explosions that Zabuza is making. It would not do to let anyone see you out so late. In the meantime, I'll dispel and pass all information back to Kakashi. Just make sure that a clone of me is around when you begin your next experiments." Everyone in the area turned to face a bright flare in the night sky after a particularly loud explosion. The angry expressions on Makoto, Sakumo, and Mei's faces made Naruto shudder. When Zabuza transforms back into a phantom, he would not want to be in his position. The Kakashi clone looked at Naruto and said solemnly, "One more important note, Naruto." His right eyelid twitched. "Unless it is a life or dead situation, try not to give Zabuza a body that's so destructive." Ultimately, the loud explosions deep in the forest rudely woke up everyone who was still asleep in the house, proving that the Kakashi clone was correct. As Sakura stormed into their room, Naruto pretended to be anxious and panicked, only to discover that Sasuke and Naruto had already summoned a Kakashi clone. After attempting to calm everyone down, the Kakashi clone left Team 7 to protect Tazuna, Tsunami, and Inari while he went to check what caused the explosion. Kakashi returned after 15 tense minutes, tense for Sakura, Tazuna, Tsunami, and Inari, to disclose that although there had been indications of a ninja battle, the ninjas in particular had moved on. For a further frustrating few minutes, Kakashi persuaded Tazuna that those ninjas were probably ninjas on a mission from other villages and had nothing to do with Gato. Fearing for the safety of their unappointed leader, a number of villagers carrying pitchforks had come to check on Tazuna by that point. After years of oppression, Wave Village had no village head, but Tazuna was the one that most of the villagers looked up to. To make sure Tazuna and his family were safe, the villagers had insisted on remaining up all night. The once fearful villagers seemed to have become a tough, cooperative group after the incident with Gato a few days ago. As they maintained a vigil to prevent any more strange occurrences, half the village had camped out around Tazuna's house the next thing anyone knew. However, everyone was exhausted by the time dawn arrived and Kakashi had dispersed, even though the majority were rejoicing over the absence of any more attacks. Large areas of the forest had been burned and destroyed when teams of villagers had scouted the area. Naruto and Sasuke, who were members of Team 7, were not amused because they were aware of the true cause of the explosions. Throughout the entire night, Naruto observed that there were remarkably few phantoms in his immediate vicinity. Makoto was probably fulfilling her vow to hold Zabuza accountable for his careless behavior at the moment. Mei's house is located deep within the Phantom Realm. As he interviewed the 70th candidate for Naruto's Phantom Army, Zabuza moaned. He was sentenced to interview duties for the ensuing decades as a result of his brief moment of fun in the real world. It would be an understatement to say that Makoto, Mei, and Sakumo were unhappy. After a vicious tongue lashing that made even the bold swordsmen tremble from their combined attack, Makoto and Mei had stormed off. Sakumo was sitting close to Zabuza when he conducted the interview with the most recent candidate. Sakumo was clearly trying to ensure that Zabuza wasn't skiving at work. As long as the strict taskmaster was present, there would be no spontaneous breaks. The 70th applicant, a mousy young man who claimed to be a Miss Genin who had passed away years ago, said in a small voice, shrinking inward at the stern looks he was receiving from Sakumo and Zabuza. He was unaware that Sakumo was actually glaring at Zabuza. I was a Genin when I died, but I picked up some B-rank skills during my time in the Death Realm, he said. Zabuza looked at the young man and said sharply, I am afraid we're looking for someone more powerful, next. The gloomy young man sagged out the door, which opened to reveal two ghosts. A small boy and a man who appeared to be in his 30s. Zabuza rolled his eyes and started to wave the young boy away when he heard a chair crash and turned to see Sakumo standing quickly up and staring at the two of them in disbelief. Sakumo looked at the two and exclaimed, Dan, in a stifled voice, and is that Nawaki? I have no idea that the two of you remained as phantoms. I've never seen both of you around Konoha while I was a phantom. We have been following Tsunade on her travels these past decades. Even after so many years, Tsunade is still suffering from our deaths, we cannot just leave her. The elderly gentleman replied gravely. But we heard of the soul summoner from Konoha a day ago and had came immediately to apply for one of his summoned phantoms positions. Only to find that you were not open. We were trying our luck again today and it seems that the Shinigami is smiling upon us. Nawaki and I are willing to form a pact with this Konoha soul summoner, if he is willing to take on the both of us. Sakumo glared at Zabuza, who shrugged nonchalantly, and trailed off, not open. But Zabuza was supposed to be on recruitment duty yesterday. But that's water under the bridge now. We'll of course welcome the two of you into our Phantom Army. Zabuza said dismissively, Oh come on Sakumo. The kid doesn't even look at all powerful. The young boy with the blonde hair glared back at him as he spoke. I have been training in the Phantom Realm during the years I am dead. I am not like most phantoms who let their skills become stagnant once they became a phantom and sink into an immortal and mostly immoral existence. The child gave a vigorous injection. I am close to Jonin level after all those years of training under Dan's guidance. If not for the fact that a phantom's appearance remained unchanged from the moment she died, I would have long ago taken on a more mature appearance. And I see no point in using henge constantly in the Phantom Realm to alter my appearance, which is just a waste of chakra. The older man laughed and said, If I were you, I wouldn't look down on the half-pint to you. He's the type that always strived to do better in life or death. And his skills are really Jonin level, maybe even high Jonin level by now, especially with the decades of trainings he had in the Phantom Realm. So Sakumo, what say you? You were high Jonin when you died, and I doubt Nawaki's the only one that constantly improve on his skills. You should be cage level by now. That's more than enough for me to approve you as one of the soul summoner's own. Sakumo laughed. And I would take your word for young Nawaki's current skill level. Zabuza protested angrily, but Sakumo, you hadn't even tested the kid. Sakumo stated solemnly, despite the young boy's flush, even if Nawaki's skills do not reach our standards, his presence would ensure a certain level of political pullback in Konoha. Nawaki is a Senju, younger brother of Tsunade Senju, one of the Sannin. I can tell you, if word of Naruto's ability ever gets out, he would most likely have an ally with the Senju clan if Nawaki is at his side. Kakashi sighed. He had already visited 2 cities close to the fire and water country's borders in just 2 days. He was exhausted from using chakra to increase his speed every day, especially when he had to perform additional chakra. Intensive tasks, such as eliminating Gato's associates before they could endanger Wave Village, Konoha, or Team 7. Additionally, Kakashi was currently being changed to resemble a big, dirty mercenary. Haku looked like a punk with blonde hair, and his appearance was made more realistic by the fact that he actually smells like one. Haku in particular was suffering from the constant use of the transformation technique. A few days prior, he had used one of his devoted dogs to summon a letter and a specific bank account book back to Konoha. The news in the heavily encoded scroll must have shocked Sarutobi, Kakashi thought. Independent Jonin teams would have been dispatched to the neighboring countries to silence Gato's contacts before they even realized what had happened if he had a close relationship with the Hokage. As she observed the corpses of the thugs defending Gato's outpost in this city, Haku declared, "We're done." She had asked Kakashi to say a quiet prayer for them for a moment. Only the accountants and the merchants are left. With a weary grin that Haku was unable to see, Kakashi said, "Good, let's tell them the new order of business, shall we?" Before freezing in mid-step as he approached the outpost. After glancing at Kakashi's tense figure, Haku immediately looked around for potential adversaries. When she didn't notice anything unusual, Haku asked, "What happened? Did you notice something?" The seemingly empty street had yielded no adversaries? Grasping his head, Kakashi grunted, "Nothing in particular. It seemed that one of my clones back in Wave Village has some information regarding Naruto and his unique ability to pass me. Let's move. The faster we finish our mission, the faster we can return to Wave Village. Something tells me that if we don't return soon, Naruto's going to spring another surprise at my poor self." By the time everyone woke up, it was evening. Since they only have 3 more clones left to last the next 3 days, Team 7 would only call forth another Kakashi clone the following day, per Kakashi's instructions prior to his dispelling in the morning. Additionally, because Kakashi insisted on being present during the experiments for safety reasons, any future research involving the creation of phantom bodies using seals would have to be temporarily halted. Sakumo had declared the 2 new recruits to be strong ninjas from Konoha a few decades prior, and Naruto's phantoms had returned with them after dinner. In order for Makoto to spend time with Sasuke, he had called her first. Then, feeling a connection with the young child who was actually much older than him, Naruto went ahead and made the agreements with the 2 new recruits, beginning with the youngest. The boy with the blonde hair grinned and said, "I Nawaki Senju swear fealty to Naruto Uzumaki, in a pact of summoner and spirit." The pact was formed with a flash of white light, and Naruto sensed a connection to the boy's spirit. "Pleased to meet you." "Happy to meet you too," Naruto exclaimed, flashing a similar mischievous smile. "Sakumo said you're high Jonin level, but you look really young." "Unfortunately, I can't help the way I look, but I've spent decades in the Phantom realm to train myself up," Nawaki clarified. Phantoms became Phsycal in Phantom realm, retaining their chakra system. Thus any training done there is similar to the real world. The body just gets stronger, but there are also many temptations in the Phantom realm, and much less limitations to a phantom since a phantom is already dead and can't be any deader. That's the reason why most phantoms are stuck at the skill levels they were at after they died, seeing no reason to improve themselves. But those that really spend the time in training gets even stronger. And since chakra is main currency in the Phantom realm, the strongest ones are also the richest. "That's so cool," exclaimed Naruto. Naruto felt as though he was seeing his own values mirrored in the boy's eyes. Naruto had been the dead last of his class and had only kept up his skills via training and hard work. "If I ever become a phantom, I want to be just like you as well. Because I am going to be the most powerful Hokage Konoha has ever seen, dead or alive." "Really?" Nawaki inquired, startled. "You want to be Hokage as well?" "That is, well, was my dream too, before I died. Now my only dream is to see my sister smile again." Observing the sadness in Nawaki's eyes, Naruto uttered, "Oh. Don't worry. One of the conditions you and Dan wants to join with me is so that you can be with your sister again, isn't it? I promise that I'll find a way to contact her and let the 3 of you spend time together."
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.